Chapter 138. Outside the Long Life Hall. Su Qin's eyes were calm as he prepared to enter the Long Life Hall. Stop, this is an important place in the palace. A eunuch stood in front of Su Qin and looked at Su Qin warily. However, before the eunuch could finish, he was interrupted. Little does step aside. This is the imperial uncle. The eunuch who often accompanied the Emperor of Tang changed his expression and immediately stopped the eunuch. Imperial uncle. The eunuch was confused, but since the eunuch had said so, he naturally did not dare to continue blocking Su Qin. Imperial uncle. The eunuch looked at Su Qin and said respectfully. Su Qin's expression did not change as he walked into the Long Life Hall unhurriedly. After Su Qin had completely entered the Long Life Hall, the eunuch who stopped Su Qin at first could not help but ask, Imperial uncle? How come I've never seen this imperial uncle before? The young eunuch said carefully. The eunuch glared at the eunuch. There are many things you don't know. If I hadn't stopped you just now, you would have made a big mistake. What? The eunuch was shocked. I'll only say it once. In the entire palace, the imperial uncle is one of the 10 people you can't afford to offend. Do you understand now? A hint of respect flashed in the eunuch's voice. He often followed the Emperor of Tang, Li Sheng, and naturally knew that in front of Su Qin, the Emperor of Tang, Li Sheng, had never acted like an emperor. Moreover, only in front of Su Qin would the Emperor of Tang, Li Sheng, show a sincere smile. Based on this point alone, the eunuch knew that Su Qin was definitely one of the people that the Emperor of Tang, Li Sheng, valued the most. In addition, Su Qin was the Empress's elder brother, and Prince Li Yuan's third uncle. With so many identities, even an ordinary noble would not be as good as Su Qin. Within the Longevity Hall, the ministers were silent, and the atmosphere was heavy. Third brother, why are you here? When Empress Su Yuanyun saw Su Qin, she immediately stood up and wiped her tears. Third brother? Is he the third son of family Su? Many officials looked at Su Qin and began to discuss in low voices. As important officials of the imperial court, they naturally knew of Su Qin, who had always been holed up in the imperial palace. These officials had always been curious about Su Qin. They knew that given the relationship between the emperor and his family Su, as long as Su Qin said the word, regardless of whether it was entering the court as an official or becoming a general in the army, it was a matter of one word. Power and wealth were at their fingertips. But Su Qin did not. Instead, he stayed in the imperial palace for 10 years, and even rarely left the imperial palace. This made many officials wonder if there really was a saint in the world who did not care about fame and wealth. Su Qin walked to the dragon bed and glanced at the Emperor of Tang, Li Sheng. At the moment, the Emperor of Tang, Li Sheng, was in a coma. His face was pale, and if it weren't for the occasional rise and fall of his chest, he would be no different from a dead man. All of you leave, Su Qin said without looking at the officials. Hearing this, the officials' faces changed. It was not that they did not trust Su Qin, but if they all went out and something happened to the emperor, who would be responsible? Prince Li Yuan was still young, and could not bear the heavy responsibility of the country. Only Empress Su Yuanyun was refreshed. Since Su Qin asked the others to go out, it meant that he had a way to save the Emperor of Tang. Su Yuanyun trusted Su Qin very much. If it weren't for Su Qin, she would probably still have yin qi in her body and could not give birth to a dragon child. Since the third brother asked us to go out, let's go out. Empress Su Yuanyun looked at the officials and said, Empress, this is against the rules. Some of the officials could not help but ask. Against the rules? Empress Su Yuanyun frowned and said coldly, if anything happens, I will take responsibility. Is this against the rules? This? The officials looked at each other and could only bow and say yes. Soon, Su Yuanyun, the officials, eunuchs, and maids all left the Palace of Immortals and waited outside. For a moment only Su Qin, the Emperor of Tang, and Li Sheng were left in the huge Palace of Immortals. I asked you to wait. Why are you in such a hurry? Su Qin raised his right hand, and a trace of true essence entered the Emperor of Tang, Li Sheng's body. In an instant the Emperor of Tang, Li Sheng's body trembled, and his exhausted body suddenly began to recover quickly. Arhat's true essence had the effect of changing the body and cleansing the marrow. The Emperor of Tang, Li Sheng's body at this moment, Withstanding a trace of Arhat's true essence was like a sweet dew after a long drought. Even his pale face began to turn red. However, Su Qin did not stop. The Emperor of Tang Li Shang had a mental breakdown, not a physical one. The next moment, Su Qin stretched out his index finger and slowly pressed it between the Emperor of Tang Li Shang's eyebrows. Clang! As if a bronze bell rang, the Emperor of Tang Li Shang felt himself suddenly awaken from a daze. This is... The Emperor of Tang Li Shang suddenly opened his eyes. Third brother. The Emperor of Tang Li Shang saw Su Qin and relaxed. A moment later, the Emperor of Tang Li Shang said weakly, "It seems that third brother saved me." The Emperor of Tang Li Shang, although unconscious, had a vague perception of the outside world and knew that Su Qin had come to save him. "It's nothing." Su Qin shook his head slightly and looked at the Emperor of Tang Li Shang and said, "You've been on the throne for almost 10 years. Although you seem to be calm, in fact, you haven't suffered any setbacks. Third brother taught me a lesson." The Emperor of Tang Li Shang smiled bitterly. At this moment he also realized where his problem was. Su Qin glanced at the Emperor of Tang Li Shang and turned to walk out of the longevity hall. After Su Qin left, many ministers immediately rushed in. Your Majesty, are you okay?" When the ministers saw that the Emperor of Tang Li Shang had woken up, they were so excited that they burst into tears. Empress Su Yuyan's face was full of joy. "Your Majesty, can we take a look at your body?" At this moment, a royal doctor who looked very old-age said, "Take a look." The Emperor of Tang Li Shang nodded slightly. A moment later, the royal doctor finished looking at the Emperor of Tang's body, and his face was full of disbelief. "Impossible. How is this possible? Full of essence, qi and spirit. How did this happen?" The old-age royal doctor's face was full of shock. In his eyes, even if the Emperor of Tang woke up, it would take some time for him to recover. But at this moment, the Emperor of Tang's body and spirit couldn't be any better. What kind of medical skill is this? The old-age royal doctor was dumbfounded and in disbelief. After Su Qin saved the Emperor of Tang Li Shang, he returned to the right spring square again. "It's about time. I can start breaking through." Su Qin sat cross-legged and made a decision in his heart. Since reaching level 4 complete a few months ago, Su Qin had been adjusting his state, and now it was about time. Thinking of this, Su Qin slowly closed his eyes, and the aura in his body began to rise and circulate. Half a day later, Su Qin's aura began to calm and contract, as if it was condensed to a point. Then, whoosh, a terrifying aura soared into the sky, almost breaking through the barrier of the heaven and earth great array in the right spring square. "I finally reached level 5. Su Qin opened his eyes, and his mind entered his body, carefully feeling the changes in his body. Chapter 139. Not bad. After stepping into the 5th heaven, whether it's the physical body, true essence, or divine sense, they have all increased by several times. Su Qin nodded slightly, his thoughts fluctuating. The improvement from the 4th heaven to the 5th heaven was not as qualitative as the breakthrough from the 3rd heaven to the 4th heaven, but it still made Su Qin very satisfied. After all, at his level, even the slightest bit of improvement was extremely difficult, let alone crossing over to the next realm. After the 5th heaven, it's the 6th heaven. As for the 7th heaven above the 6th heaven, it can be considered the true peak of the Venerable Arhat. Su Qin touched his chin, his thoughts wandering. According to what Su Qin learned from the moon worship's moon goddess, even in the depths of the endless ocean, the 7th heaven mythical realm was extremely rare. Even if they existed, they would pursue the illusory path of the land immortals, and would not show their traces in front of outsiders. It's said that only by reaching the 7th heaven Arhat can there be hope of condensing a miniature domain. Su Qin thought silently in his heart. Whether it was the Venerable Arhat or the martial arts legends, the biggest difference between them and the martial arts 9 grades was the control of the power of heaven and earth. However, the power of heaven and earth was vast and boundless. Even the invincible 9th heaven Arhat could not control all of the power of heaven and earth. Therefore, the cultivation at the later stage of Arhat's level was to constantly compress and condense the power of heaven and earth that one controlled to form a miniature domain. The miniature domain might not be comparable to the power of heaven and earth in terms of range, but in terms of quality, it far surpassed the power of heaven and earth. However, to compress and condense the power of heaven and earth was tantamount to fighting against the heaven and earth. How difficult was that? Even the venerable Arhat of the seventh heaven only had hope of condensing a miniature domain. As for whether one could successfully condense it, it depended on whether one's foundation was strong enough. The one who had a miniature domain must be the venerable Arhat of the seventh heaven. However, the venerable Arhat of the seventh heaven did not necessarily have a miniature domain. Forget it, it's too early for me to think about this. Su Qin shook his head and sighed. Now, he had just entered the fifth layer of Arhat. He was still some distance away from the sixth layer of heaven, not to mention the seventh layer of heaven. The Emperor of Tang, Li Sheng, seems to be recovering well. Su Qin raised his head slightly and looked in the direction of the Longevity Temple. At this moment, the Emperor of Tang, Li Sheng, was leisurely eating the food prepared by the imperial chef. Obviously, he had recovered from the betrayal of his subjects. When Su Qin saw this, a smile appeared on his face. The Emperor of Tang, Li Sheng, was Su Qin's brother-in-law, but he was also the Emperor of the Empire of Tang. For the sake of his younger sister, Su Yueyun, when the Emperor of Tang, Li Sheng, was in mortal danger, Su Qin would lend a helping hand. But in other matters, Su Qin was not willing to interfere. Otherwise, whenever the Emperor of Tang, Li Sheng, was in trouble, Su Qin would lend a hand. Then what was the point of cultivating? There were billions of living beings in the Empire of Tang, and there were so many big and small matters every day. If Su Qin took care of everything, he would probably not be able to cultivate to the earth immortal realm even if he died of old age. Su Qin stayed in the palace, and he valued the peace and quiet here. If he got involved in the political affairs of the Empire of Tang, wouldn't it be the opposite of him? Besides, Su Qin had done enough for the Emperor of Tang, Li Sheng. If it weren't for Su Qin, the Emperor of Tang, Li Sheng, would have died in the hands of assassins when he was in the family Su. Not to mention the rebellion of Prince Sun, which was also quelled by Su Qin. Su Qin saved the Emperor of Tang, Li Sheng 3 times and even helped him ascend to the throne. This was enough to offset the fact that he was borrowing the sign-in from the imperial palace. For the next period of time, I will go into seclusion to stabilize the fifth heavenly layer. Su Qin's thoughts turned quickly, and he made a decision in his heart. During the seclusion, Su Qin put a wisp of his mind on the family Su and the Emperor of Tang to ensure that their lives would not be in danger. As for other things, he completely put them down. And just when Su Qin began his seclusion, within the Empire of Tang waves were brewing. Since the 10 kings secretly instigated their ministers to defect to the Emperor of Tang, and after learning that the Emperor of Tang fell ill, they became even more arrogant. The Jiannan king even mocked the Emperor of Tang in public. When the Emperor of Tang, Li Sheng, learned of this news, his expression did not change at all. Instead, he did what he should do. This move made the 10 kings feel that the Emperor of Tang was admitting defeat. For a time, the power of the kings in the Empire of Tang was monstrous. Time slowly passed by. 2 years passed in a blink of an eye. In these 2 years, the kings became more and more confident. The Anshi king even asked the Emperor of Tang for another piece of land. When this matter spread to the imperial court, it directly made all the civil and military officials indignant. The territories of the 10 vassal kings together accounted for nearly 1/5 of the entire territory of the Tang Empire. If they were to give out more land, wouldn't they have to give away half of the Tang Empire? Moreover, once this began, the kings would do it a second time and a third time. At that time, the Empire of Tang might have to change its name directly. However, this time, the Emperor of Tang, Li Sheng, ordered the Forbidden Army to directly fire all the spy strongholds from the 10 kings in Chang'an City. In addition, all the ministers who had a little relationship with the 10 kings, regardless of their official position, were arrested. Turned out, in these 2 years the Emperor of Tang, Li Sheng, did not do nothing. Instead, he secretly investigated all the spies and chess pieces arranged by the 10 kings in Chang'an City. Until today, when the 10 kings were most arrogant, he quickly took action and removed all the spies buried by the 10 kings in Chang'an City. And the Emperor of Tang, Li Sheng's action was very successful. 2 years of forbearance in exchange for an outbreak, which directly stunned the 10 kings. It was still in the small town. The 10 kings gathered here again. What happened? Didn't the Emperor of Tang admit defeat? Why did I lose contact with all the spies I put in Chang'an overnight? The Jiannan king looked extremely ugly and almost roared out. You ask me, how do I know? The Hudong king also looked gloomy and impatient. He was still worried about the chess pieces he buried in Chang'an city. How could he pay attention to the Jiannan king's words? We've lost the trouble. Without the spies and spies, we kings are like blind men who know nothing about Chang'an city. The Fanyang king sighed and looked at the other kings. What should we do now? As expected, the Emperor of Tang is vicious. 2 years ago, when he fell ill because of anger, I was still wondering if it was true. Now it seems that it was a deliberate fake news to make us lower our guard and reveal flaws. The Shuafang king of Gojoseon sighed softly. If the vassals also realized the seriousness of the matter, once the spies buried in Chang'an were removed, they would not be able to know anything about Chang'an. It was tantamount to having a knife hanging over their heads, and they did not know when it would fall. Just when these kings were at a loss, a voice suddenly sounded. It's very simple. You can directly rebel against the Emperor of Tang. Chapter 140. It's very simple. You can directly rebel against the Emperor of Tang. As soon as these words came out, the 10 kings on the field were suddenly shocked. Who is it? The Shuafang of Gojoseon looked dignified and kept looking around. The other 9 kings were the same, because the voice that suddenly sounded just now did not belong to any of them. Don't be afraid. I have no malice. At this time, a man in a white robe with an indifferent expression slowly walked out and stood in front of the 10 kings. Who are you? How do you know this place? The Shuafang of Gojoseon looked at the indifferent man and said word by word. Only the 10 kings knew about this town, and it has long been surrounded by many of the king's subordinates and confidants, and no one is allowed to enter. The indifferent man was able to sneak in quietly. He is at least a peak grade 1 great grandmaster. You don't need to know who I am. You just need to know that I am here to help you. The indifferent man showed a smile on his face and said, Help us. The 10 kings looked at each other, and their thoughts turned quickly. If it was someone else who dared to say this in front of the 10 kings, they would have already been taken down. But the indifferent man can appear here in the hearts of the kings. His means are absolutely unfathomable, and he is a peak grade 1 great grandmaster. Such a powerhouse's words are naturally persuasive. Help us. How are you going to help us? The Shuafang of Gojoseon was silent for a while and asked. It's very simple. The indifferent man looked at the Shuafang of Gojoseon. The reason why you don't dare to rebel against the Emperor of Tang now is that you are worried about the Li royal ancestor in the Emperor of Tang's palace. The indifferent man paused and continued. But now the ancestor in the Emperor of Tang's palace, just leave it to us. We, the Shuafang of Gojoseon keenly grasped the word we in the indifferent man's words. How can we trust you? The Shuafang of Gojoseon was very vigilant. Although he already had some guesses in his mind, he still wanted to know the exact answer. The Emperor of Tang's palace. Su Qin finally walked out of the right spring square. In these 2 years, not only have I stabilized my cultivation at the 5th heavenly layer, but I've also improved further. Even if I'm not at the peak of the 5th heavenly layer, I'm not far from it. Su Qin walked unhurriedly through the Eastern Palace as he thought to himself happily. Let's see what happened in the past 2 years. Su Qin released his divine will, which swept across Chang'an city in an instant. The Emperor of Tang has finally learned to endure? Su Qin only needed to use his divine sense to roughly understand what had happened recently. It was nothing more than the Emperor of Tang removing all the spies and chess pieces of the vassals overnight. That's a qualified emperor. Su Qin nodded slightly. It was obvious that the Emperor of Tang, Li Sheng, had made rapid progress. At least, he knew when to endure and when to explode. Third uncle. You're out. At this time, Princess Li Wan saw Su Qin and immediately shouted loudly. In the past 2 years, Su Qin was either in seclusion or signing in. As for other things, he didn't care about them. Even if the Emperor of Tang came looking for him sometimes, he might not be able to see him. Third uncle. Princess Li Wan trotted to Su Qin, waved her fist and said proudly, Third uncle, look, I'm already a rank 9 martial artist. If it was someone else in the palace, a rank 9 martial artist might not be worth mentioning. But Princess Li Wan wasn't even 10 years old. To be able to develop inner force and become a rank 9 martial artist at this age, in addition to the abundant martial arts resources in the palace, it was also because of Princess Li Wan's own talent and hard work. Not bad. Su Qin just came out of seclusion and was in a good mood. He said casually, "If you have any questions about martial arts in the future, you can come to me." Really? Princess Li Wan's eyes suddenly widen. After chatting with Princess Li Wan for a while, Su Qin walked out of the East Palace and strolled around the palace. Speaking of which, it's been a while since I signed in at the Ancestral Temple. When Su Qin passed by the Ancestral Temple of the palace, he suddenly stopped and thought. Su Qin glanced at the guardian outside the Ancestral Temple and slowly walked to the front of the Ancestral Temple. System sign in. Su Qin's thoughts fluctuated, and he muttered in his heart. Congratulations to the host for signing in successfully. You have received 9 Yao Bao. A cold, mechanical voice sounded in Su Qin's ears. 9 Yao Bao? Su Qin's heart skipped a beat. He has signed in at the palace for more than 10 years, and most of the treasures he signed in were divine arts, pills, and spiritual kingdoms. Treasures like 9 Yao Bao that sound like a weapon are rare, and there are only a few hundred of them. I'll go back and take a look. After signing in, Su Qin's goal was achieved and he returned to the East Palace. In the right spring square, Su Qin sat cross-legged, his mind integrated into the system space. In a corner of the system space, an illusory bao made entirely of divine light slowly swayed. This is the 9 Yao Bao? Su Qin looked a little surprised. The 9 Yao Bao gave him the feeling that it didn't exist at all. Where's the arrow? Since it's a bao, why is there no arrow? Su Qin frowned and his mind began to slowly integrate into the 9 Yao Bao. In an instant, all kinds of information flooded into his mind. After a while, Su Qin slowly opened his eyes. Using divine sense as a guide and world's essence qi as an arrow, the arrow will kill. This is the 9 Yao Bao? Su Qin's thoughts were fluctuating. According to the information in the 9 Yao Bao, one must at least have the divine sense of a venerable arhat to be able to pull the 9 Yao Bao. And the power displayed by the 9 Yao Bao depends on the user's divine sense. In other words, the stronger the divine sense, the power of the 9 Yao Bao will skyrocket without limit. This 9 Yao Bao has already transcended matter. It's completely a spiritual treasure. Su Qin looked amazed and muttered to himself. Whether it's the spirit or divine sense, they are all illusory and have no substance. Even if there is a spiritual secret technique like moon forging divine sense, Su Qin can roughly understand it. The Shaobooking, Shaoshutting, that the readers used to use before had already died. Now they were basically using the mommy reading app. After all, at his level, he can barely see the reorganization and dispersion of the divine sense. Even if there is no moon forging divine sense, sooner or later, Su Qin will figure out other secret techniques to forge divine sense. It's just that this 9 Yao Bao. Until now, Su Qin still doesn't know what kind of material the 9 Yao Bao is made of. No matter what, the 9 Yao Bao is mine. Su Qin calmed down and stopped thinking about it. Anyway, now that the 9 Yao Bao has recognized him as its master, as long as Su Qin is willing, he can pull the bao at any time, and that's enough. Taiji Palace. The Emperor of Tangli Shang is discussing state affairs with the civil and military officials. Suddenly, at this moment, a forbidden army soldier hurried over and knelt on the ground with a plop. Your Majesty, there is an urgent report from the border. Speak. The Emperor of Tangli Shang's expression froze and said, Your Majesty, the 10 vassal kings suddenly joined forces and led an army of millions towards Chang, and as soon as this came out, the Emperor of Tangli Shang's expression changed drastically. Showbitches. Opening sign in Buddha's palm. Chapter 141. In the Taiji Palace. When they heard that the 10 kings were going to attack Chang, and with millions of troops, everyone was shocked. Many ministers did not expect that the 10 kings would dare to rebel like this. How is it possible? The Emperor of Tangli Shang was shocked and puzzled at the same time. In the past few years, he also had some understanding of the 10 kings. Grab. Although the 10 kings seemed to be united on the surface, in fact, There were many contradictions between them, and no one trusted each other. If the Emperor of Tang Li Shang openly forced them, the 10 kings might join forces against a common enemy, but the Emperor of Tang Li Shang did not force them too much. He just pulled out the spies that the kings had placed in Chang'an. Although it seemed to have a great impact on the kings, in fact it did not hurt them. After all, the foundation of the kings was in their own fiefdoms. As long as the Emperor of Tang Li Shang did not reach their fiefdoms, everything could be saved. Although the kings were ambitious, they did not dare to rebel openly, because it was equivalent to completely falling out with the Empire of Tang, and there was no room for maneuver. It would be good if they succeeded. What if they failed? The kings did not dare to gamble at all. What was the reason that made the vassal king so determined to rebel? The Emperor of Tang Li Shang subconsciously noticed that there was something wrong, but he could not figure it out. Your Majesty, what should we do now? At this time, a minister stood up and asked with a worried face, "What should we do?" The Emperor of Tang Li Shang suddenly stood up, and a trace of coldness appeared on his face. Since they want to fight, then I will fight with them. If the kings did not rebel, Li Shang did not mind spending decades to slowly remove the king's wings and finally cut off the vassals. But now the kings had already mobilized millions of troops and were about to attack Chang'an. The Emperor of Tang Li Shang had no other choice. If he flinched at this time, he would not only lose face for himself, but also the face of the Li royal family. Minister of War. The Emperor of Tang Li Shang turned his gaze to the Minister of War. Your subject is here. The Minister of War stepped forward and bowed. Assemble the army. The Emperor of Tang Li Shang said in a deep voice. As you command. The Minister of War bowed. Oh, the triplets are here. Outside Right Spring Square. Third uncle. Princess Li Yuan stood there and shouted towards the Right Spring Square. Why are you here? Su Qin walked out, glanced at Princess Li Yuan and asked casually, didn't third uncle say that he could come over if he had any questions regarding martial arts? Princess Li Yuan blinked her big eyes and said pitifully, could it be that third uncle has forgotten? Okay, ask away. Su Qin shook his head. He didn't know where Princess Li Yuan learned to act like a spoiled child from. He remembered that his little sister Su Yuyun didn't know how to do this, right? Did Li Yuan learn martial arts? Su Qin asked. Li Yuan was the son of Li Shang, the Emperor of Tang, and the future crown prince. Unlike Princess Li Yuan, Li Yuan was very afraid of Su Qin. When he saw Su Qin, he was like a mouse seeing a cat. He has no interest in martial arts at all. I don't even want to talk to him. Princess Li Yuan shook her head like a little adult. Yesterday I beat him up and told him to fight with me for delicious food. Su Qin was speechless when he heard that. However, although Princess Li Yuan had just entered the 9th level, she had no problem beating up a child less than 10 years old like Li Yuan. Tell me about your doubts. Su Qin didn't continue to talk about other topics and said directly, Third uncle, every time I circulate my martial arts I feel a little sluggish. I've asked a few eunuchs but they don't know what's wrong. They just let me try a few more times. Princess Li Yuan looked at Su Qin expectantly. For as long as she could remember, Su Qin had always stayed in the Right Spring Square as if he had never left. Even her father respected Su Qin very much. He didn't see Su Qin as an ordinary person at all. Therefore, in Princess Li Yuan's heart, Su Qin should be a great expert. Try to circulate your martial arts now. Su Qin glanced at Princess Li Yuan. He had a rough idea of the reason, but he still let her circulate her martial arts for a while. Okay. Princess Li Yuan immediately sat cross-legged on the ground and circulated her martial arts slowly. In less than a moment, Su Qin stopped her. You should change your cultivation technique, Su Qin said. The problem faced by Princess Li Yuan is that her cultivation technique is not compatible with her own physique. Of course, the incompatibility here is extremely slight. Even a grade 1 great grandmaster would find it difficult to detect. But in Su Qin's eyes, it's natural for him to see it. Change my cultivation technique. Princess Li Yuan was puzzled. The cultivation technique she cultivates is already the best cultivation technique in the entire palace of the Emperor of Tang. If she wants to change it, she really doesn't know which one to change. Wait a minute. Su Qin glanced at Princess Li Yuan and turned back to the Right Spring Square. Soon, Su Qin walked out, holding a piece of paper with wet ink in his hand. You can cultivate according to this? Su Qin asked casually. On the paper was a cultivation technique Su Qin has obtained in the past few years. Although it is not as good as the other cultivation techniques Su Qin obtained, it is the most suitable cultivation technique for Princess Li Wan's physique. Princess Li Wan took the paper and looked at it carefully. Suddenly, her eyes widened in disbelief. Although she is only a grade 9 martial artist, Princess Li Wan can faintly perceive that the cultivation technique Su Qin gave her seems to be much better than all the cultivation techniques in the Imperial Palace. Remember, on the path of martial arts, step by step is the most important. Don't be impatient. After Su Qin gave a few words of advice, he let Princess Li Wan go back. After Princess Li Wan left, Su Qin turned his eyes and looked in the direction of the border. The 10 vassal kings joined forces and sent millions of troops? Su Qin frowned slightly. Since the news came out in the morning, Chang and city has been in a state of panic, and even people in the imperial palace are gossiping. At the same time, thousands of miles away from Chang'an city, millions of vassal kings' troops are camping here. And behind the army, the 10 vassal kings gathered in a military camp. My lord, we've already done as you said. When the army arrives at Chang'an city, the old monster in the imperial palace will be handed over to you. Jiannan King looked at the indifferent man not far away, and his tone was slightly respectful. The other 9 vassal kings also showed respect when they heard this. If it weren't for the indifferent man revealing his identity, they would never dare to risk it all and rebel. The vassal kings are independent. Although they nominally listen to the orders of the Emperor of Tang, in fact, they are a country of China. Glory, wealth, power, and beauties they can enjoy for generations. Under this premise, how could the vassal kings dare to take the risk of rebellion? But the benefits given by the indifferent man were too great, and the vassal kings felt that the rebellion would not fail, so they gambled everything. Chapter 142. Don't worry. The indifferent man shook his head slightly. The indifferent man's performance was tantamount to giving the kings infinite confidence. At this moment, even if they were in the army, they began to talk and laugh. However, speaking of which, the Empire of Tang really has some heritage. There is an ancestor hidden in the imperial palace. If it weren't for Sir, we really wouldn't dare to rebel. Grab. A smile appeared on the Fanyang King's face as he said with emotion. Indeed, after all, the empire has been established for more than 500 years. The other kings felt the same way and kept nodding. When we arrive at Chang'an city, it will be fine if the Grand Master of the Tang Imperial Palace does not appear. But if he does, with my lord holding him back, we can let our million-strong army exhaust him to death. A trace of ruthlessness appeared on the biting king's face. In this world, martial artists are rampant, but the countries are still above martial artists. Why is this? Of course, it's because of the army. Under the legend realm, even if a peak grade 1 great grandmaster is trapped in an army of millions, they will be exhausted to death. Of course, no peak grade 1 great grandmaster will take the initiative to jump into an army of millions. With the terrifying speed of a peak grade 1 great grandmaster, if they want to escape, it is impossible for an army of millions to catch up. But the premise of all this is that there is no other peak grade 1 great grandmaster to stop them. If there is a peak grade 1 great grandmaster, then with an army of millions, it will be a real inescapable net for any peak grade 1 great grandmaster. When we break through Chang'an city, I will personally cut off the Emperor of Tang's head, and let him know that we kings are not at his mercy. The Jiannan King sneered. Okay. Have you thought about how to divide the country after destroying the Empire of Tang? At this time, the indifferent man suddenly said, divide the country. As soon as these words came out, the eyes of the 10 kings suddenly became fiery. Wasn't the reason why they risked rebellion for this moment? Sir, we have thought about it. When the time comes, we will divide the Empire of Tang equally. The king of Gojoseon's eyes flashed and said respectfully to the indifferent man, oh, equally. The indifferent man looked at the other vassals with a faint smile. If it was something else, they could split it equally. However, who wouldn't want to own the entire country? The Emperor of Tang's palace. Taiji Palace. Some soldiers brought in information from the front lines. There seems to be a grade 1 great grandmaster in the Qing coalition army? The Emperor of Tang Li Sheng glanced at him. And there's more than one? The Emperor of Tang Li Sheng looked extremely solemn. Although he had long guessed that there must be some reason for the sudden rebellion of the 10 kings, the biggest possibility was that they had some kind of confidence. However, the Emperor of Tang and Li Sheng did not expect that the other party's backing was actually more than one peak grade 1 great grandmaster. It must be known that even when the Emperor of Tang was alive, the only peak grade 1 great grandmaster in the Empire of Tang was eunuch Zhao. Order all troops to retreat and do not contact the other party. The Emperor of Tang Li Sheng took a deep breath and said in a deep voice. Although this is equivalent to giving up part of the territory of the Empire of Tang and letting the Qing coalition army pressure the border, there is no other way. The other party has a grade 1 great grandmaster, coupled with an army of millions. Ordinary the Empire of Tang's army can't resist at all. In that case, why not gather all forces and fight to the death outside Chang'an City? Although the Emperor of Tang Li Sheng knows that there are powerhouses in the imperial palace, but since the kings dare to rebel, they must have expected this and even thought of a way. After all, it is no secret that the powerhouse in the Emperor of Tang's palace has taken action several times. Although the kings are ambitious, they are not fools. Before the rebellion, they must have weighed the pros and cons. After confirming that they have the confidence, they will start the rebellion. Right Spring Square. Empress Su Yuan's face was full of worry. Third brother. Recently His Majesty has been unable to sleep because of the rebellion. Empress Su Yuan sighed softly. I also heard about this. Su Qin nodded slightly and said casually, but you don't have to worry, everything will be over soon. It will be over soon. Empress Su Yuan wanted to laugh, but she couldn't. Empress Su Yuan knows the Emperor of Tang Li Sheng very well. The Emperor of Tang Li Sheng wouldn't be unable to sleep all night if he had the confidence. Third brother. I'm here to discuss something with you. Empress Su Yuan thought for a while and said carefully, what is it? Su Qin was slightly surprised. It was the first time he saw his little sister talk to him in such a tone. Tonight, can you take Wan-er and Yuan-er out of Chang'an City? Su Yuan's eyes were red. Leave Chang'an City? Su Qin immediately understood what Su Yuan was worried about. The 10 kings had millions of troops, and the situation of the Empire of Tang was not optimistic. If Chang'an City was finally breached, Su Qin could escape with Li Wan and Li Yuan. Don't worry. Su Qin smiled and said, go back and sleep, and everything will be fine when you wake up. I hope so. Empress Su Yuan sighed softly and said a few more words to Su Qin before leaving the Right Spring Square. After Su Yuan completely disappeared, Su Qin slowly walked out of the Right Spring Square and looked up in the direction of the king's army. Rebellion? Millions of troops. There was an inexplicable vortex slowly rotating in Su Qin's pupils. The Eye of Truth opened instantly and observed the qi of heaven and earth. With the help of the celestial qi refining technique, Su Qin could instantly see through half of the Empire of Tang. If the 10 kings stayed in their respective territories, I wouldn't bother to do anything. Su Qin looked calm. But now you want to rebel? Su Qin's eyes were deep. Found you. Su Qin seemed to have found something and instantly locked onto a position thousands of miles away. Then, Su Qin took a step forward, stretched out his right hand, and slightly grasped the void. Layers of divine light gathered. In an instant, a bow-shaped void completely composed of divine light appeared in Su Qin's hand. The next moment, Su Qin held the bow in his right hand and put his left hand on the string. Bang! The bow was drawn to a full moon. Boom! The world's essence qi within a few miles and dozens of miles suddenly became violent, forming a monstrous wave of world's essence qi that continued to rush towards Su Qin. To be precise, it was converging towards the 9-yao bow in Su Qin's hand. This scene was extremely shocking. A terrifying aura spread across dozens of miles in an instant. All the martial artists in the upper realm felt a great sense of oppression descending. That is, outside the Imperial Palace Ancestral Temple, the temple keeper's face changed wildly. At this moment he could almost feel that the world's essence qi was completely out of control and was rushing towards the Imperial Palace. What the hell is going on? The temple keeper was shocked and trembled all over. Not only the temple keeper, but the dozens of Grade 1 great grandmasters in the imperial palace were also terrified. At this moment they seemed to be facing the true power of heaven and earth. And at this time, in front of the right spring square, Su Qin held the 9-yao bao in his right hand and pulled the bowstring with his left hand. Endless world's essence qi gathered and formed an illusory arrow on the 9-yao bao. As soon as the arrow was formed, it quickly condensed from illusory to real. A trace of shocking killing intent lingered and collided on the arrow, bursting out countless flashes of light more terrifying than thunder and lightning. Chapter 143. Inside the Long Life Temple. The Emperor of Tang Lishang was worried about the Qing coalition. At this moment, the Emperor of Tang Lishang suddenly felt a sense of trepidation. Although ordinary people can't detect the fluctuations of world's essence qi, with the violent gathering of world's essence qi, they will still feel a sense of oppression, as if they are being stared at by some prehistoric beast. What's going on? The Emperor of Tang Lishang looked surprised. Your Majesty. Eunuch Lu's figure instantly appeared in front of the Emperor of Tang Lishang, and said with a trembling voice, the world's essence qi is completely out of control. Eunuch Lu's tone showed great horror. As a Grade 1 great grandmaster, Eunuch Lu is naturally very sensitive to the world's essence qi. However, at this moment, he found that the originally docile world's essence qi suddenly became violent. Surrounded by such world's essence qi, Eunuch Lu only felt that 90% of his strength was suppressed, and this suppression was gradually increasing. The world's essence qi suddenly gathered and became violent. For ordinary people, they may feel a little depressed and uneasy, but in the eyes of the martial artists in the upper realm who have been cleansed by the world's essence qi, it was tantamount to a natural disaster. Not only Eunuch Lu, but all the martial artists in the upper realm in Chang and city were the same. At the same time, in front of the right spring square, Su Qin held the 9-yao bao, and his eyes were deep. At this moment, the arrow on the 9-yao bao has completely condensed into a solid entity. Phew! Absorb! The arrow was constantly breathing as if it had a life of its own, swallowing the world's essence qi from all directions. It's almost done. Su Qin narrowed his eyes and slowly adjusted the arrow, aiming at the position locked by eyes of truth and celestial gaze. Then, bang! Su Qin released the 9-yao bao with his left hand. Wang! Like a stone thrown into a lake, the Navagraha arrow brimming with killing intent turned into a streak of resplendent divine light, as it shot towards a certain location at an extremely terrifying speed. At this moment, whether it was the forbidden army and warriors in the imperial palace, or the countless commoners in Chang, and they all saw an unforgettable scene. A beam of divine light shot up into the sky from the depths of the palace and then disappeared into the sky. Right spring square. Su Qin loosened his grip on the 9-yao bao and stored it in the system storage. With the disappearance of the 9-yao bao, the yuan qi of heaven and earth that had suddenly become violent also gradually calmed down. It spread in all directions and returned to a radius of dozens of miles. I didn't expect the 9-yao bao to consume so much energy. If I shoot dozens of arrows in a row, won't I have to use up 10% of my divine will? Su Qin was amazed. The 9-yao bao was a pure divine sense artifact. Pulling the 9-yao bao didn't require physical strength or true yuan, only enough divine sense. I can feel that the arrow just now was not my limit. If I continue to accumulate power, the power of the arrow will increase infinitely, but at the same time, during the accumulation of power, the consumption of my divine consciousness will increase. Su Qin carefully experienced the feeling of pulling the bao just now. Su Qin even felt that if he accumulated power to the end and exhausted all of his divine will, the arrow he shot would definitely be able to look down on the martial arts legends. Except for the 7th level martial arts legends who had condensed a miniature territory, no other martial arts legends would be able to block this arrow. Of course, Su Qin wouldn't really try it. For any martial artist who had condensed their divine will, once their divine will was exhausted, their strength would be greatly reduced. Although Su Qin had all kinds of trump cards, and even if his divine will was exhausted, he still had other means, but he wouldn't put himself in danger. When I pulled the 9-yao bao just now, the yuan qi of heaven and earth that gathered was completely forced? Su Qin touched his chin, a thoughtful look on his face. Normally, the yuan-chi of heaven and earth gathered by a heaven and earth array like the essence gathering paradise would be heavily filtered by the array. The yuan-chi of heaven and earth was stable and could be absorbed by Su-Qin. But the yuan-chi of heaven and earth that was drawn by the 9 Yao Bao just now was completely violent. The king's army. Reporting, the Empire of Tang's army has begun to retreat. They probably don't plan to come in contact with us. A soldier quickly walked in, knelt down on one knee, and reported respectfully. Retreated. Could it be that the Emperor of Tang is afraid? Hearing this, King Anyang sneered. The more the Emperor of Tang Li Shang acted like this, the more guilty and uncertain he was. The Emperor of Tang's intention is probably to gather all of his forces and have a showdown with us outside Chang and city. The Shuafang of Gojoseon thought for a while and said with admiration in his voice. Even if he was standing on the opposite side, the Shuafang of Gojoseon felt that the Emperor of Tang's choice was not wrong, giving up a small part of his territory in exchange for the gathering of forces and increasing his chances of winning. It could be said that the Emperor of Tang had done everything he could. Unfortunately, the Shuafang of Gojoseon sighed softly, looked at the indifferent man not far away, and said respectfully, "With Lord here, the Emperor of Tang can only be defeated." As soon as he said this, a smile appeared on the faces of the other 9 kings. The indifferent man also smiled slightly and did not say anything. Just as the kings were thinking about how to divide the treasury of the Empire of Tang after taking down Chang and city, another soldier hurriedly rushed in. Outside, something happened outside. The soldier's tone was hurried and revealed his fear. Something happened? King Jianan frowned. At this moment, they were surrounded by hundreds of thousands of troops. What could happen? The Shuafang of Gojoseon was also puzzled. In his view, with millions of troops protecting them, plus the indifferent man and other peak grade 1 beside them, they should be at their safest. How could something happen? Only the indifferent man's face changed. He directly got up and left the camp. Seeing this, the 10 kings looked at each other and also followed out. When the 10 kings walked out of the camp, they noticed a divine light faintly appearing at the end of the sky. Under the shocked eyes of the kings, the divine light continued to approach, getting bigger and bigger, and finally faintly formed the shape of a huge arrow, crossing thousands of miles and shooting over. Not good. The Shuafang of Gojoseon's scalp exploded. Not only the Shuafang of Gojoseon, but the indifferent man next to him also broke out in cold sweat. The next moment, the divine light transformed by the huge arrow arrived in an instant and completely covered the camp where the 10 kings were. No! At the moment when the divine light of the arrow shrouded, several roars faintly came from the military seal. In a trance, the aura of a peak grade 1 suddenly burst out. However, these auras only lasted for an instant. In fact, they did not even last for an instant before they were completely obliterated by the divine light that the huge arrow had turned into. Wherever the arrow passed, everything was annihilated under the violent power. The 10 kings didn't even have time to react, and had already turned into nothingness. Chapter 144. Silence. A deathly silence. The rest of the king's army stared blankly as the 10 kings were annihilated under the divine light. Their hearts suffered an unprecedented impact. The divine light that shot from the end of the heavenly canopy just now only covered the vicinity of the 10 kings. Therefore, even though tens of thousands of soldiers were affected, even more soldiers could only watch helplessly as their lords turned into nothingness, leaving nothing behind. No! This is impossible. Some soldiers' eyes were bloodshot, they couldn't believe it. They followed the kings to rebel, and they had already thought of what the worst outcome would be. But even if the rebellion failed in the end, they would have to go through a fierce battle. But now? What is this? They didn't even see the army of the Empire of Tang, and their kings were annihilated by a divine light? Countless soldiers rubbed their eyes fiercely, hoping that everything they saw just now was an illusion. However, it was a pity. As time went by, panic continued to spread, and these soldiers could only accept this result. It was real. All of this was real. They gambled everything, mobilized millions of troops, and wanted to rebel and change the world. But it was all over before it even started. Is it possible that the Li family of the Empire of Tang really got the mandate of heaven? Our rebellion will directly cause heaven to punish us? Some of the soldiers had completely broken down and yelled hysterically. In fact, it was not only the soldiers who had this idea. When countless people saw the divine light completely enveloping the 10 vassals, they subconsciously thought that other than the heavens, who else could emit such a divine light? Just when the army fell into chaos, more than a dozen Grade 1 great grandmasters came out from various parts of the army and began to calm the emotions of many soldiers. These Grade 1 great grandmasters were the trusted subordinates of the 10 kings. When the divine light appeared, they did not stay with the kings, but stayed in various parts of the army and took charge of the situation. Because of this, they managed to escape with their lives. Soon, after a few hours, the rest of the army finally calmed down. The reason why the 10 kings dared to rebel, in addition to finding a backer, was because of the millions of troops. These millions of troops were all carefully cultivated by the kings and were loyal to the 10 kings. Therefore, they were barely able to calm down under such changes. Otherwise, if it were any other army, in the face of such a scene, they would have already completely fled. What should we do now? In the temporary barracks built by the king's army, more than a dozen Grade 1 great grandmasters sat looking at each other with solemn expressions. What should we do? A middle-aged Grade 1 great grandmaster calmed down and looked in the direction of the divine light. Chang'an City, the Grade 1 great grandmaster's heart trembled. He is deputy general of the kingdom of Gojoseon's army. The other soldiers might have thought that the heavenly divine light was a punishment from heaven, but he clearly recognized that the heavenly divine light was coming from Chang'an. What does this mean? It means that this heavenly divine light, are we still going to rebel? A Grade 1 great grandmaster couldn't help asking. When these words came out, a trace of bitterness flashed on the faces of the other Grade 1 great grandmasters. Rebel? What is there to rebel now? Even the kings are dead. Although they have temporarily pacified the army, there will definitely be problems after a long time. Currently, the king's army seems to have nearly 1 million troops, but in fact it is extremely fragile. If there is any abnormality, it will face a complete collapse. Let's go back. Let's go back to the fief and wait for the new king to appear. A Grade 1 great grandmaster said. Yes. The situation is chaotic now, and the army is leaderless. If we continue to stay, it is very likely that we will be wiped out by the Empire of Tang. The Grade 1 great grandmasters immediately nodded in agreement. Only the deputy general of the kingdom of Gojoseon had a heavy heart. Going back now, waiting for the new king to succeed the throne, and then regrouping is a way. However, will the Empire of Tang give them a chance? And what is the attitude of the person who shot that heavenly divine light? At the same time, in the Taiji Palace, the Emperor of Tang Li Shang and the courtiers were discussing the great changes that happened in Chang'an City not long ago. The world's essence qi within a radius of dozens of miles poured into Chang'an City in an instant. Even if it is now slowly dispersing, it still has a great impact. There is also the heavenly divine light that rose from the depths of the imperial palace, which made the Emperor of Tang Li Shang worried. Suddenly, at this moment, a scout from the front line quickly walked into the Taiji Palace, knelt on one knee and said loudly, "Your Majesty, there is an urgent report from the front line." Urgent report? The Emperor of Tang Li Shang was shocked. It was no longer a secret that the vassal king was rebelling and mobilizing millions of troops. What kind of urgent news could there be? The rest of the courtiers were also uneasy. Speak. The Emperor of Tang Li Shang glanced at the courtiers and said, The king's army has retreated." The scout was obviously in disbelief, but he still quickly said it. The king's army has retreated? The Emperor of Tang Li Shang's eyes widened in disbelief. He even thought that the king's army would come to the city, but he didn't expect the other party to retreat. It should be known that the rebellion of the 10 kings was tantamount to completely offending the Empire of Tang. Anyone can retreat, but the 10 kings can't. Because even if they retreat, the Empire of Tang will not allow the rebellious kings to continue to live. In this case, it is better to gather all the forces of the 10 kings and fight to the death with the Empire of Tang. The Emperor of Tang Li Shang can think of this, so can the kings. The reason? The Emperor of Tang Li Shang thought quickly and immediately asked. According to the intelligence, It is said that a divine light came from the sky and annihilated the 10 kings. The king's army of millions has no leader, so they chose to retreat. The scout braced himself and said. In fact, when he received this information, he also couldn't believe it, so he used the word said to describe it. Logically speaking, as an intelligent scout, the information he conveyed must be accurate, and it is absolutely impossible to use ambiguous words like said. Divine light? The Emperor of Tang Li Sheng only felt a roar in his mind. In a flash, the Emperor of Tang Li Sheng immediately thought of the divine light that soared into the sky from the depths of the palace not long ago. The time of the two was very close, and the Emperor of Tang just appeared in the palace, and the kings died there. That heavenly divine light was used to kill the 10 vassal kings? Thousands of miles away. Killing the 10 kings in the midst of millions of troops. The Emperor of Tang Li Sheng swallowed and only felt like he was dreaming. If what he thought was true, then this kind of method was probably like that of a Buddha. Is there a real God hidden in the palace? The Emperor of Tang Li Sheng was inexplicably shocked. Chapter 145. In the Taiji Palace. As the news of the fall of the 10 lords and the retreat of millions of troops spread, all the civil and military officials felt incredible. If it were not for the fact that the scout had already been verified and confirmed his identity before he could enter the palace, some officials would have suspected that he was a spy sent by the lords to confuse the vision of the Empire of Tang. Your Majesty, what should we do now? Some of the ministers heaved a sigh of relief. Since the army of the lords had retreated, at least Chong and city was saved, and there was no need to face the situation of millions of troops under the city. Although many officials present had been prepared to live and die with the Empire of Tang, who would want to die if they could? Just when the officials in the court were full of joy and excitement, the Emperor of Tang Li Sheng suddenly stood up. Pass my order. The Emperor of Tang Li Sheng looked around and said word by word. Mobilize the army and wipe out the fiefdoms of the 10 lords one by one. The Emperor of Tang Li Sheng was shocked by the real Buddha, hidden in the palace, but at the same time, he also realized that now was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Now that the 10 lords were dead, their fiefdoms would inevitably be in chaos. The lords died too suddenly, and there was no time to transfer power. In this situation, even the eldest son of the lord would find it difficult to stabilize the situation in a short time. If at this time the Empire of Tang swept the fiefdoms of the 10 lords in one fell swoop, together with the Emperor of Tang Li Sheng's order of pushing grace, they could definitely eliminate the eternal trouble and completely solve the problem of the lords. Yes, Your Majesty. The Minister of War quickly understood what the Emperor of Tang Li Sheng wanted to do. He immediately stood up and received the order to mobilize the troops. The army of the lords was defeated. The army of millions did not even see Chong and city, and the 10 lords were turned into nothingness by a divine light from the sky. This news was spread to the world almost at lightning speed. In all the countries under the heavens in the Jianghu and Wulin, everyone who knew of this matter was extremely shocked. In a bamboo forest, several figures were sitting cross-legged. Their eyes were leisurely and their auras were vast. They were all grade 1 great grandmasters. Why do you think the king's army was defeated? One of the azure-clothed old men asked while looking at the crowd. Everyone looked at each other in confusion. The defeat of the 10 kings of the Empire of Tang was too inexplicable. The army of the kings did not even fight with the army of the Empire of Tang before they were defeated. I heard that when the vassal army was thousands of miles away from Chong and city, a divine light descended from the sky and destroyed 10 vassal kings in one fell swoop. As a result, the army had no leader and had to retreat. One of the middle-aged men frowned and continued, there are rumors outside that the Emperor of Tang's clan has obtained the mandate of heaven, and even the heavens are helping them. As soon as he said this, the remaining people looked at each other in bewilderment. The middle-aged man's words were simply too unbelievable. The mandate of heaven? Do you really believe this? The old man in blue shook his head and said slowly, Old Qing, do you mean that there is a hidden story? The middle-aged man's eyes lit up and he immediately asked. In fact, when he first learned about this matter, he also found it hard to believe. But apart from this reason, how else could the divine light that descended from the sky be explained? Is it possible that there is no divine light at all, and all this is fake news spread by the Empire of Tang and the vassal kings? A plump woman suddenly guessed. When the others heard this, they immediately nodded secretly. Indeed, they also felt that the divine light was too incredible. Perhaps the so-called divine light was completely fabricated, and all of them were deceived by the empire of Tang and the vassal kings. The divine light does exist, the old man in blue said. Old Qing, what is the hidden story? Just say it, don't keep us in suspense. The middle-aged man couldn't help but say. It is not a mandate of heaven, it is man-made. At this point the old man in blue paused for a moment and continued. I have a good friend who passed by Chong and city on the day the vassal kings were defeated. He saw with his own eyes a divine light that rose from the depths of the palace and disappeared. Then 10 vassal kings died under the divine light that descended from the sky. The old man in blue's words seemed to have a deeper meaning. Old Qing, do you mean that the divine light was cast by someone in the palace of the Emperor of Tang? And then crossed thousands of miles and killed 10 vassal kings in an army of millions? The plump woman only felt an inexplicable sense of absurdity. Compared to what the old man in blue said, she would rather believe that the Empire of Tang had the mandate of heaven. Old Qing, is what your good friend said true? The middle-aged man's expression was extremely serious as he immediately asked. Of course it is true. The old man in blue said affirmatively. Could it be that there is a martial arts legend in the palace of the Emperor of Tang? Someone took a deep breath and suddenly reacted and muttered to himself. They are all grade 1 great grandmasters. Of course they know how difficult it is to kill 10 vassal kings in an army of millions of miles. Apart from a martial arts legend, they can't think of any other possibility. I'm afraid so, the old man in blue said slowly. That's a martial arts legend we're talking about. The rest of the people looked at each other, and a trace of horror flashed across their faces. Mengyuan Empire. The endless grassland. A tall man's eyes were calm as he stared at the vast sky. Although this tall man just stood there, it gave people the illusion that they were facing the heavens and earth. Imperial teacher. Something big has happened in the Central Plains. At this time a man quickly ran over. The 10 vassal kings of the Empire of Tang rebelled and commanded millions of troops, but thousands of miles away from Chang'an City, they were killed by a divine light that flew out from Chang'an City, the man said with a trembling voice. If he wasn't sure that the source of the information was true, he wouldn't have believed it at all. Oh, a martial arts legend? The tall man slowly looked away and whispered to himself. Imperial teacher, do you also think that the one in the Emperor of Tang's palace is a martial arts legend? The man's expression suddenly became ugly. There is a martial arts legend in the Emperor of Tang's palace, which is tantamount to a bolt from the blue for the Mengyuan Empire. Although more than 10 years ago, the Shaolin Temple also had Venerable Arhat, but the Shaolin Temple is a martial arts sect. Not to mention a martial arts legend, even if there were 2 or 3 at most, it would only increase the status of the Shaolin Temple in Jianghu, but it would have no impact on the world. Because for thousands of years, the Shaolin Temple has always been peaceful. They have no ambition. But the Empire of Tang is different. If a martial arts legend comes out of the Emperor of Tang's palace, it will inevitably have a profound impact on the situation of the world. Don't worry. The tall man shook his head and looked at the vast sky again. A martial arts legend. I will be one soon. Chapter 146. Imperial Palace. Right Spring Square. Li Yuan and Li Yuan stood in front of Su Qin. Third uncle, look, I brought him here. Li Yuan glanced at Li Yuan, then turned to Su Qin to take credit. Third uncle. Sister, she bullied me. Li Yuan finally mustered up the courage to speak. Usually, he didn't even have the courage to speak in front of Su Qin. Now Li Yuan had forced him into a corner. I bullied you? How did I bully you? Li Yuan glared fiercely at Li Yuan. Although she and Li Yuan were twins born at the same time, the Emperor of Tang, Li Sheng, and Empress Su Yueyun all treated Li Yuan as a younger brother. In fact, that was the case. Whether it was personality or other aspects, Li Yuan matured much later, and was often bullied by Li Yuan. Your sister bullied you because she practiced martial arts. Do you want to practice martial arts too? Su Qin glanced at Li Yuan and asked casually. Although Li Yuan's martial arts talent was far inferior to Li Yuan's, as a prince, learning martial arts for self-defense was not a problem. Practice martial arts? Li Yuan was shocked, then lowered his head and said, "Forget it, I don't like martial arts. If I have the time, I might as well read a few more books." Li Yuan had tried to practice martial arts a long time ago, but he had no interest in it. A few red-clothed eunuchs once helped him circulate his qi, but halfway through Li Yuan fell asleep. For Li Yuan, martial arts was extremely boring. That's fine. Su Qin also saw that Li Yuan had no interest in martial arts, so he didn't mention it anymore. Perhaps for ordinary people, martial arts was the only way out. Only by becoming a martial artist could one become famous. But in the eyes of a prince like Li Yuan, martial arts was only one of his choices. "Third uncle, I'll go first. The grand tutor is going to teach me something in the afternoon." Li Yuan carefully glanced at Li Yuan and probed. "I know, go quickly." Su Qin waved his hand and smiled. Very soon, after Li Yuan left, Li Yuan blinked his eyes and snorted. "You only know how to read books all day. What's so good about books?" "Right? Third uncle, I've been practicing a movement technique recently, but no matter how hard I try, I can't get started." Li Yuan suddenly said to Su Qin, looking distressed. Ever since the last time she followed Su Qin's instructions and learned the cultivation method, she was able to circulate her inner strength without any hindrance. Therefore, Li Yuan trusted Su Qin very much. "Tell me about it," Su Qin said casually. Li Yuan's martial arts aptitude was pretty good, so he could figure out most of his doubts by himself after pondering for a while. Only when he really couldn't figure it out would he run over to Su Qin to ask. And Su Qin wouldn't refuse. For him, giving some pointers to Li Yuan was nothing. It was as easy as lifting a finger and saying a few words. A moment later, Li Yuan's eyes were getting brighter and brighter, and his footsteps were also changing, faintly creating a series of phantoms. "Third uncle, I've gotten started." Li Yuan's little face was filled with joy. She had been thinking hard about this movement technique for half a month and couldn't make any progress. In the end, with a few pointers from Su Qin, she was suddenly enlightened. How could she not be happy? "Third uncle, I feel that you're better than the eunuchs around father." Li Yuan sighed from the bottom of her heart. Su Qin just smiled and didn't say anything. Inside the longevity hall, the Emperor of Tang looked excited. Since he ordered the army to conquer the fiefdoms of the 10 kings some time ago, he had achieved great results. Without the control of the kings, the fiefdoms were all on their own. Facing the suppression of the army of the Empire of Tang, they were completely vulnerable. In a short period of time, 4 kings' fiefdoms fell back into the hands of the Empire of Tang. Although the remaining 6 fiefdoms were barely resisting, they couldn't hold on for long. "Your Majesty is in a good mood today?" Empress Su Yueyun saw the expression on the Emperor of Tang's face and smiled. The disaster of the kings that has troubled the Empire of Tang for 500 years is about to be resolved. "Of course I'm happy," the Emperor of Tang Li Sheng replied. "Why haven't I seen Wan'er recently?" The Emperor of Tang Li Sheng seemed to have thought of something and asked. "Wan'er?" Su Yueyun pursed her lips and smiled. Recently, she often went to the Right Spring Square to look for third brother. "Third brother?" The Emperor of Tang Li Sheng nodded slightly. If it were anyone else, he would be worried that Li Yuan would go astray. But Su Qin, the Emperor of Tang Li Sheng, was absolutely assured. Others might approach Li Yuan with other motives and impure motives, but it was impossible for Su Qin. "There's something I want to ask Yun." The Emperor of Tang Li Sheng looked around and sent away the eunuchs and maids in the longevity hall. He lowered his voice and said, "What is it?" Su Yueyun was curious. "Yuner, you're familiar with the palace. Do you know which palaces are in that direction?" The Emperor of Tang Li Sheng pondered for a while, and suddenly pointed to a position near the southeast. On the day the king's army was defeated, outsiders only saw a divine light shoot up into the sky from the palace, but they didn't know the exact location. They only knew that the divine light came from the depths of the palace. But Li Sheng was different. He was in the palace at that time and was very close. He could vaguely feel that the divine light seemed to come from the depths of the palace in the southeast direction. Over there. Although Su Yueyun didn't know why Li Sheng asked about this, he answered truthfully, "There are more palaces in that direction. There are Chongwen Palace, Yichuan Palace, Wuda Palace, Fenghua Palace." Su Yueyun listed the names of dozens of palaces in a row, and finally said, "And the East Palace where we used to live is also in that direction." "I know," Li Shang thought for a while, remembered all the names of the palaces and nodded. "In the future, if there are maids and eunuchs patrolling and cleaning this place, tell them to be careful and be polite to everyone. Don't offend anyone," Li Shang reminded. Although he didn't know who was hiding in the palace and had saved the Empire of Tang many times. But since the other party didn't plan to show up, Li Shang could only try his best not to disturb the other party. Right Spring Square. Of course, Su Qin didn't know that the Emperor of Tang, Li Shang, had asked the maids and eunuchs to be careful here. At this moment, after he finished giving instructions to Li Wan, he strolled slowly in the palace. Time really flies. Su Qin walked unhurriedly, and occasionally saw the patrolling Forbidden Army, but he pretended not to see them. Where should I sign in today? Su Qin's thoughts fluctuated, and he was a little troubled. If it was the Shaolin Temple, there were only 2 places in total, the Hidden Scripture Pavilion and the Bodhi Court, and he could just choose one. But in the palace, there were more than a dozen places where he could sign in repeatedly. The Crop Altar. Su Qin made a decision in his heart. In the years since he came to the palace, Su Qin had harvested countless spiritual fruits and spiritual liquids from the Crop Altar, and he had a good impression of it. Soon, Su Qin came to the Crop Altar. System sign in. Su Qin said in his heart. Congratulations to the host for signing in successfully. Received embryonic origin pill. Chapter 147. Congratulations to the host for signing in successfully. You have received the embryonic origin pill. A mechanical and cold voice sounded in Su Qin's ears. Embryonic origin pill? Su Qin raised his eyebrows. He had signed in at the Crop Altar so many times, but this was the first time he had received such a pill. Is it similar to the glazed golden pill and the 9 revolutions whirling pill of the Shaolin Temple? Su Qin guessed. The next moment, all kinds of information about the embryonic origin pill and its effects appeared in Su Qin's mind. After a moment, a trace of shock appeared in Su Qin's eyes. His mind quickly merged into the system space and looked at the embryonic origin pill that had just appeared in a corner. So this is the embryonic origin pill? Su Qin's mind, which was originally calm like an ancient well, fluctuated slightly. According to the information given by the system, the embryonic origin pill couldn't directly improve the physical body, true essence, or divine sense. To be precise, the embryonic origin pill wasn't a pill that increased cultivation. There were 2 kinds of medicinal effects. If a martial artist took it, it could greatly replenish their vitality. Replenishing vitality didn't extend one's life, but it could make up for the lost vitality. Although this medicinal effect was important, it wasn't like there weren't any similar pills in the world. What Su Qin really valued about the embryonic origin pill was its second medicinal effect, which was to strengthen one's foundation. What was the foundation? The foundation wasn't talent or aptitude, but its importance to a martial artist was no less than the first 2. A martial artist with a strong foundation could often defeat those of the same level, and even fight those of a higher level. When breaking through, the risk would be slightly reduced. Even if the breakthrough failed in the end, there was still a chance to try again. Su Qin didn't know whether his foundation was strong or weak because ever since he was born, there had never been an opponent who could fight him head-on. But foundation was just like strength and cultivation. Naturally, the higher the better. No one would dislike it. It only took me 30 years to reach the 5th level of Arhat, completing a path that ordinary martial artists might not be able to complete in 400 or even 500 years. Although I don't know how my foundation is, it's very necessary to strengthen it with the embryonic origin pill. Su Qin's eyes were filled with joy. I'll take the embryonic pill when I get back. Su Qin made up his mind and immediately turned to leave. Right Spring Square. Su Qin sat cross-legged. In front of him, a pill that was faintly burning with illusory flames floated slowly. It was extremely mystical. It was the embryonic pill. If I didn't know the effects of the embryonic pill, I wouldn't have dared to take it. Su Qin sighed. The phenomenon caused by the origin embryo pill surpassed that of the lustrous golden pill. If it wasn't for the fact that the right Spring Square had Su Qin set up layers of heaven and earth great array to suppress everything, Everyone in the palace would have noticed the phenomenon caused by the origin embryo pill. I wonder to what extent this embryonic pill can strengthen my aptitude. Su Qin looked at the pill that was faintly burning with an illusory flame, his thoughts fluctuating. Immediately after, Su Qin took a light breath and swallowed the embryonic essence pill that was floating in front of him. Boom! As soon as the embryonic essence pill entered his body, it quickly melted and turned into billowing illusory flames that spread to every part of Su Qin's body. In just a few moments, Su Qin's limbs, blood vessels, and flesh were filled with this illusory flame. Su Qin's expression changed slightly. Even with his body that had undergone 4 metamorphoses, he still felt pain under the burning of the illusory flame. How terrifying was this? With Su Qin's current body, even if he stood there and let ordinary martial arts legends attack him, he wouldn't be harmed at all. But now, the illusory flame that the embryonic essence pill had turned into was causing Su Qin to feel pain. Is this the strengthening of the foundation? Su Qin was deep in thought. With his strength, stopping the spreading of the illusory flame in his body was just a matter of thought. But Su Qin didn't do it, because he now had a vague understanding of the essence of strengthening the foundation. The foundation wasn't the physical body, nor was it the vital essence, nor was it the divine will. Strengthening the physical body, increasing the vital essence, and purifying the divine will was just an addition to the current foundation. For example, if you want to continue to make a tall building taller, you just need to build from the highest floor. But the foundation was different. It was equivalent to the foundation of a tall building. If you want to strengthen the foundation, you have to start from the very foundation. Whoosh! Whoosh! Su Qin sat cross-legged, his chest rising and falling slowly. Illusory flames were faintly burning on his body. This illusory flame didn't burn physical objects, but it was constantly polishing something that was also illusory in Su Qin's body. Time passed slowly. In the blink of an eye, several hours had passed. The illusory flame burning on Su Qin's body finally subsided and finally extinguished completely. The moment the illusory flame disappeared, a brand new aura emerged in Su Qin's body, like bamboo shoots after a rain, exuding a vast and boundless aura. Whoosh! The blood in Su Qin's body surged like a great river, surging endlessly. This was the manifestation of his physical body's improvement. After consuming the origin embryo pill, Su Qin's physical body didn't reach the bottom line of the 5th transformation, but it was much stronger than usual. Apart from his physical body, Su Qin's vital essence and even his divine will had increased by varying degrees. It's done! Su Qin slowly opened his eyes, revealing a hint of joy. After consuming the origin embryo pill, Su Qin's strength was still at the 5th firmament. It didn't increase at all, but his physical body, vital essence, and divine will had increased by varying degrees. His physical body increased the most, followed by his vital essence. Not bad. All the suffering I suffered wasn't in vain. Su Qin looked extremely satisfied. If he cultivated normally, he would need at least a year to achieve such an improvement. But now he had completed it in a few hours. How could he not be satisfied? I've strengthened my foundation. Let's see if my cultivation speed has increased. With a thought, Su Qin took out the connate spirit liquid, blood bodhi, vermilion fruit, and other spirit liquids and spirit fruits. The next moment, several drops of connate spirit liquid flowed into Su Qin's mouth. After a while, several blood bodhi were swallowed. After a while, Su Qin consumed a vermilion fruit. The night passed. Su Qin opened his eyes and stood up slowly. Immediately, his entire body began to emit a heart-palpitating aura. The heaven and earth essence chi around Su Qin seemed to have turned into a vast ocean, constantly rising and vibrating. As expected, my cultivation speed has also increased. Although it's not by much, it's enough to create a huge gap between me and others after hundreds of years of accumulation. Su Qin let out a long sigh, looking overjoyed. According to his previous estimation, under the premise of consuming connate spirit liquid, blood bodhi, and other spirit liquids and spirit fruits, it would take him a few years to reach the peak of the 5th firmament. But now it would take him 1 to 2 years. Chapter 148. It's a pity. The effect of the embryonic origin pill is the greatest when taken for the first time. Su Qin sat cross-legged, slowly converging his aura as he thought silently. The embryonic origin pill can strengthen the foundation, but it's not an endless strengthening. According to the system's information, the efficacy of the embryonic origin pill will be greatly reduced when taken for the second time, and it may even be completely ineffective if taken a few more times. Although Su Qin was a little disappointed, he could accept it. The embryonic origin pill has already brought Su Qin enough surprises, so what's there to be dissatisfied with? In the next period of time, I'll go to the crop altar to sign in a few more times to see if I can get a few more embryonic origin pills. Su Qin touched his chin and made a decision in his heart. In any case, I'll take the embryonic origin pill until it has no effect before thinking about other things. At the same time, inside the Long Life Temple, the Emperor of Tang looked dignified as he looked at a piece of information in his hand and looked up at a figure standing below. This figure has ordinary facial features and would hardly attract anyone's attention if he mixed into a crowd. But at this moment, he appeared in the Long Life Temple. Obviously, he was valued by the Emperor of Tang. One must know that the Long Life Temple is the palace of the Emperor of Tang for generations. It is located in a relatively private place, and under normal circumstances, the Emperor of Tang will not call any of his subjects here. Is what you said true? The Emperor of Tang put down the information in his hand and solemnly said, "Reporting to your majesty. This is what I learned from a concubine of the Jiannan king. After repeated confirmation, it should be true." This figure is called Jiang Ying, who is now in charge of the intelligence agency of the Empire of Tang. He is someone that the Emperor of Tang can absolutely trust. A few years ago, when the 10 vassals rebelled against nearly half of the subjects in the imperial court, the Emperor of Tang realized that there was a problem with the intelligence agency of the Empire of Tang. After that, the Emperor of Tang personally re-established the intelligence agency of the Empire of Tang and appointed Jiang Ying as the head of the intelligence agency. Over the years, Jiang Ying did not disappoint the Emperor of Tang. Not only did she remove all the spies and chess pieces that the 10 vassals had planted in the Empire of Tang, but she also monitored the entire imperial court and even began to spread her intelligence network to all the countries in the world. Your Majesty, the reason why the 10 vassals dared to rebel was because they had the support of the Blood-Kill Gate. Jiang Ying cupped his fists and said, "Ever since the vassal king's million-strong army was defeated and retreated back to their respective territories, the Emperor of Tang ordered the army to raise the 10 feudal territories one by one. Now the effect was obvious. The fiefs of 5 vassal kings had already fallen into the hands of the Emperor of Tang. The Jiannan king was one of the 5 vassal kings. This information that Jiang Ying obtained precisely came from a certain concubine of the Jiannan king. According to this concubine, the Jiannan king had accidentally blurted it out one day when he was drunk, and she had kept it in mind. Blood-Kill Gate. The Emperor of Tang's face was a bit ugly. The Blood-Kill Gate was not a martial arts sect. It was more like an organization that lurked in the dark. Although it was not limited to the world, it had an extremely terrifying influence on all the countries in the world. It was said that when the Imperial Secret Service of Nanming was established, it was to resist the infiltration of the Blood-Kill Gate. Of course, the most important reason why the Blood-Kill Gate was free and unfettered until now and feared by all the countries was that more than 200 years ago, the Blood-Kill Gate had a martial arts legend. Although this martial arts legend had crossed the sea and disappeared 200 years ago, all the countries in the world still did not dare to act rashly. The Blood-Kill Gate dares to instigate the internal affairs of the Empire of Tang. How dare they? The Emperor of Tang suddenly stood up, his face full of anger. Although it seemed that the 10 vassals had been defeated and were about to be raised by the army of the Empire of Tang, the situation was very good. But all of this was based on the divine light that rushed out from the depths of the imperial palace. It was this divine light that directly turned the 10 vassals into nothingness, causing the morale of the million-strong army to drop to the bottom and not dare to fight again. On the surface, it seemed that the Empire of Tang had taken a big advantage. But what if there was no divine light? I'm afraid that the result would be different. Your Majesty, this matter needs to be cautious. Jiang Ying saw the look on the Emperor of Tang's face and immediately advised. The Blood-Kill Gate secretly instigated the 10 vassals and schemed against the Emperor of Tang's family. It seemed that they had completely stood on the opposite side of the Empire of Tang. But in fact, the Empire of Tang could not touch the Blood Kill Gate at present. Although the martial arts legend of the Blood Kill Gate had crossed the sea and disappeared 200 years ago, the disappearance of the sea did not mean that he had fallen. The martial arts legend had Shoyuan for 500 years. In other words, the martial arts legend of the Blood Kill Gate was very likely still alive. If at this time the Empire of Tang made a move against the Blood Kill Gate, what if the martial arts legend came back? I know what to do. The Emperor of Tang gradually calmed down and sat back on the dragon throne. Everyone in the world believed that there was a martial arts legend in the palace of the Emperor of Tang, but the Emperor of Tang knew his own affairs. Although he also guessed that there was a martial arts legend hidden in the palace, he did not know who it was. Not only did he not know who it was, but the Emperor of Tang did not even know any information about the other party. Was it a man or a woman? How old was it? What was its relationship with the Empire of Tang? He did not know any of these. Therefore, the Emperor of Tang could occasionally pull a tiger's skin, but he did not dare to do too much because the Emperor of Tang was not sure if the existence hidden in the depths of the palace would make a move the next time the Empire of Tang faced a life-and-death crisis. What should we do now? The Emperor of Tang thought for a while and asked, Your Majesty, since the Blood Kill Gate dares to secretly provoke the 10 kings, they must have another plan. The most important thing now is to stabilize the situation in the Empire of Tang, and completely digest the fiefdoms of the 10 kings. Zhang Ying saw that the Emperor of Tang had calmed down, and he was slightly relieved and immediately said. He was really worried that the Emperor of Tang would completely fall out with the Blood Kill Gate in a rage. I know. The Emperor of Tang thought for a while and nodded. No matter how the Blood Kill Gate instigated, as long as the Empire of Tang was impregnable, the Blood Kill Gate could not do anything. At the same time, the fiefdom of the palace of Gojoseon, in a very hidden manner, the eldest sons of the remaining 5 kings gathered here. Now, as the army of the Empire of Tang continued to advance, 5 of the 10 kings were gone, and the remaining 5 were in danger and could fall at any time. At this moment, the eldest sons of the last 5 kings appeared here to discuss how to deal with the army of the Empire of Tang. Damn it, why does my father want to rebel? Can't he just enjoy power and beauties in his fiefdom? The eldest son of the Fanyang king could not help but whisper. If the 10 vassal kings had not rebelled, they would still be the eldest son of the first wife, living a life of drunken stupor. It's useless to talk about this now. Let's talk about what to do next. The eldest son of the Hudong king shook his head and said, The Empire of Tang has been established. If we don't make a decision, I'm afraid it will be too late. As soon as these words came out, the remaining 4 eldest sons of the kings were shocked. The eldest son of the Hudong king was right. Now their 5 fiefdoms could not hold for long. After a long time, the eldest son of the Pingla king cautiously said, How about we surrender to the Empire of Tang? Chapter 149. Surrender to the Empire of Tang? The expressions of the other sons of the vassal kings changed. At this point, the army of the Empire of Tang had already defeated the 10 princes. Instead of waiting for their fiefdoms to be broken, it was better to surrender. Maybe they could get half a life of wealth and wealth? Just when the prince's disciples were tempted, a cold voice suddenly sounded. Surrender. Others may live if they surrender. But as princes you must die. A white-clothed man with a faint blood-red mark on his forehead walked out silently. You are. The faces of all the sons of the vassals changed greatly. Are you from the Blood Kill Gate? Only the princes of the Shuafang of Gojoseon solemnly said. Blood Kill Gate? The princes looked at each other with ugly faces. If it weren't for the Blood Kill Gate, the 10 princes wouldn't have the courage to rebel. If they didn't rebel, today's situation wouldn't have happened. To some extent, most of the credit for their current situation was due to the Blood Kill Gate. Yes. Under the gaze of the princes, the man with the bloody mark frankly admitted. What do you mean by what you just said? The princes of the Shuafang of Gojoseon frowned and looked at the man with the bloody mark. What do I mean? The man with the bloody mark sneered. Haven't you already guessed it in your heart? The rebellion will implicate the whole family. Maybe the Emperor of Tang will not kill everyone in order to smoothly take over the 10 fiefdoms, but as princes, do you think you can survive? The man with the bloody mark said with a trace of disdain on his face. Even an outsider like him could see it clearly. He knew that everyone had a way out, but the son of the first wife of the king absolutely did not. At most, they would die with dignity and be given a cup of poisoned wine. The words of the man with the bloody mark made the prince's disciples' hearts thump and their hands and feet turn cold. We can't beat them, and surrendering means death. Then what should we do now? The son of the first wife of the Fanyang prince spoke with deep despair. They did think of escaping, but the world was so big, where could they escape to? Perhaps as soon as he left his fief, his head would be chopped off by his subordinates and offered to the emperor of Tang. Since you've come to us, you must have a plan. The son of the Shuafang of Gojoseon stared at the man with the blood-colored mark and said in a deep voice. Hearing this, the man nodded slightly and said, "In this rebellion, not only did the 10 kings suffer heavy losses, but my blood kill gate also suffered heavy losses. In order to support the rebellion of the 10 kings, the blood kill gate sent out 3 peak grade 1 experts, but in the end, they were buried under the heavenly divine light together with the 10 kings. This kind of loss, even for a huge organization like the Blood Kill Gate that had produced a martial arts legend, was still very painful. Most importantly, the Empire of Tang would find out sooner or later that all of this was done by the Blood Kill Gate. At that time, the Empire of Tang would definitely retaliate. If it were other countries, they might be afraid of the martial arts legend of the Blood Kill Gate from 200 years ago and would not dare to make a move. But the Emperor of Tang now had a martial arts legend in his palace, so there was no need to worry about it. Therefore, the man with the blood-colored mark simply decided to go all out and make a last stand. The way is very simple. You can surrender. The man with the blood-colored mark glanced at the princes and said lightly, "Surrender." The princes looked at each other with a puzzled face. Just now, the man with the blood-colored mark said that they would definitely die if they surrendered, but now he was asking them to surrender. "I'm asking you to surrender, of course it's a fake surrender. I will replace one of you and go to see the Emperor of Tang. When that time comes, I will personally kill the Emperor of Tang. The Emperor of Tang's death will inevitably plunge the Emperor of Tang into chaos, and naturally has no time to care about the kings." The man with the blood-colored mark slowly said, "Assassinate the Emperor of Tang." The Shufang king's son's expression changed. There is a martial arts legend in the imperial palace of the Tang Empire. How did you assassinate under the nose of a martial arts legend? The other princes also looked at the man with the blood-colored mark. The plan of the man with the blood-colored mark seemed to be fine, but in fact, it was impossible to achieve. A martial arts legend? It's not like the Blood Kill Gate has never had a martial arts legend. The man with the blood-colored mark shook his head and said, "Don't worry, the means of the Blood Kill Gate are not something you can imagine." "Okay, then let's do it." Seeing this, the Shufang king's son gritted his teeth and agreed. As the man with the blood-colored mark said, as princes, there was no way out. The Emperor of Tang's palace. Su Qin was strolling leisurely. Nowadays, in addition to signing in and cultivating, he occasionally gives pointers to Li Wan. This little girl's aptitude is good. Even if she is not as talented as Xian Ku of the Shaolin Temple, her future achievements will not be low. At least, under the guidance of Su Qin, it will not be difficult for her to reach grade 1 Great Grandmaster. As for whether she can go further, it depends on her own fortune. Recently, I have been signing in at the crop altar, but there has been no sign of an origin pill. Su Qin's thoughts fluctuated as he silently thought in his heart. However, although there was no sign of a second origin pill, Su Qin is not in a hurry. Anyway, he has a lot of time. If he can't sign in 1 year, then he will sign in 10 years. If he can't sign in 10 years, then he will sign in 100 years. At that time, even if Su Qin has not stepped into the realm of Great Arhat, he is not far away. Shou Yuan has been extended again, so he is not in a hurry. At the same time, in the Taiji Palace, Your Majesty, there is news from the fiefdoms. The remaining 5 fiefdoms are willing to surrender, and their first sons are already on the way back to Chang'an. That's good. The Emperor of Tang Li Shang's face was filled with joy. Time passed. Half a month later, the 5 first sons were successfully escorted to Chang'an. Your Majesty, several first sons of the kings want to see Your Majesty, saying that they have something important to say. The eunuch approached the Emperor of Tang and whispered, "See me?" The Emperor of Tang thought for a while and said, "Bring him up." Soon, the 5 first sons of the king slowly entered the imperial palace under the guidance of the eunuch and finally stopped outside the Long Life Temple. After the eunuch entered and asked, the 5 first sons of the kings were allowed to enter. The Emperor of Tang sat on the dragon throne and looked at the 5 first sons of the kings in prison clothes. "What do you want to say to me?" "Your Majesty, this sinner has something important to report about the Bloodkill Gate." The first son of the king of Fanyang opened his mouth and took a step forward, wanting to speak more clearly. "Bloodkill Gate?" The Emperor of Tang was shocked and was about to listen carefully. Suddenly, at this moment, the first son of the king of Fanyang suddenly turned into a blood-colored shadow and rushed towards the Emperor of Tang. "Sure enough, you want to assassinate me." Seeing this, the Emperor of Tang did not panic at all, as if he had already expected it. Just that. The next moment, whoosh, more than a dozen eunuchs in red appeared in front of the Emperor of Tang like lightning. Bang! A muffled sound of collision rang out. The figure that turned into a blood-colored shadow suddenly flew out. Failed. The blood-colored shadow turned back into the man with the blood-colored mark, and his expression was extremely ugly. He did not expect that the Emperor of Tang would be protected by more than a dozen Grade 1 Great Grandmasters at any time, and that they would react so quickly. Almost at the moment he attacked, they appeared. Dong dong dong. Outside the Long Life Temple. Suddenly there was a lot of light footsteps. More than a dozen deputy commanders of the Forbidden Army, who were also Grade 1 Great Grandmasters, surrounded the Long Life Temple, cutting off any possibility of the man with the blood-colored mark escaping. "This is troublesome." The man with the blood-colored mark fell into an abyss. Chapter 150. Inside the Long Life Temple. The blood-colored man stared at the Emperor of Tang hiding behind more than a dozen red-clothed eunuchs and shuddered. He thought that the biggest risk of sneaking into the imperial palace was that he might be discovered by the legend. For this reason, the blood-colored man deliberately put on the Bloodkill Gate headquarters treasure, the breath-concealing jade robe, to prevent being discovered by the legend. The breath-concealing jade robe was left by the legend of the Bloodkill Gate 200 years ago. Wearing this jade robe can completely avoid the detection of other legends. And this is the blood-colored man's biggest reliance. In his view, as long as the legend in the imperial palace does not take action, the assassination of the Emperor of Tang should be a done deal. "You already knew that I was going to assassinate you?" The blood-colored man suddenly realized something and looked at the Emperor of Tang. This was the only possibility he could think of. Only in this way would the Emperor of Tang be vigilant in his heart, and let the experts in the imperial palace hide in the dark. Once there is any situation, they will take action, resulting in the current situation. Yes. The Emperor of Tang heard the blood-colored man's words and nodded slightly. In fact, since the assassination attempt when the Emperor of Tang was still the crown prince, he has been very vigilant against assassination. Coupled with the fact that the Bloodkill Gate added fuel to the fire of the rebellion of the 10 Kings, this was even more so. One must know that the Bloodkill Gate's favorite thing to do is assassination. Therefore, before the first son of the king entered the imperial palace, all the red-clothed eunuchs with Grade 1 strength were ordered to protect him in the dark, and more than a dozen Forbidden Army deputy commanders were stationed outside. Once there is any abnormality, they will lead the army to surround the Long Life Temple. The Emperor of Tang's arrangement can be said to be flawless. Even if the assassin is a peak Grade 1 Great Grandmaster, with the protection of more than a dozen red-clothed eunuchs, they can delay for a while, enough for the Emperor of Tang to retreat. Then, with the army outside the temple encircling and suppressing, the peak Grade 1 Great Grandmaster can be slowly killed. We originally thought that a peak Grade 1 Great Grandmaster would come to assassinate us, but you are not. The Emperor of Tang shook his head as if it was a pity. The difficulty of killing a peak Grade 1 Great Grandmaster and killing a Grade 1 Great Grandmaster is completely different. Peak Grade 1 Great Grandmaster. The face of the man with the blood-colored mark stiffened. Even the Bloodkill Gate only had 4 peak Grade 1 experts. 3 of them had died under the heavenly divine light, and the remaining one had to guard the Bloodkill Gate's headquarters. It can be said that at present, the Bloodkill Gate does not have any peak Grade 1 Great Grandmasters. Do you want to surrender yourself? Or do you want my people to do it? The Emperor of Tang looked at the man with the blood-colored mark who had an uncertain expression and asked, "Surrender." The man with the blood-red mark stared straight at the Emperor of Tang and squeezed out a few words from between his teeth. "For hundreds of years, the disciples of my blood-kill gate have never surrendered." As soon as he finished speaking, the man with the blood-colored mark disappeared from where he stood. Not good. More than a dozen red-clothed eunuchs saw this scene, and their expressions changed. They protected the Emperor of Tang behind them while constantly scanning the surroundings. At this moment, suddenly, a dull sound of fighting came from outside the Long Life Temple. He escaped. The red-clothed eunuchs looked at each other and did not go out to support. Their task was to protect the safety of Emperor Li Shang. If they ran out rashly and jumped into the other party's plan of luring the tiger away from the mountain, and let Emperor Li Shang fall into a trap, then they would really die. Besides, there are more than a dozen Forbidden Army deputy commanders outside the Long Life Temple. Coupled with the army, even if the assassin escapes, he will not last long. They only need to ensure the safety of the Emperor of Tang. This time, outside the Long Life Temple, the man with the blood-colored mark looked at the more than a dozen Forbidden Army deputy commanders who faintly surrounded him. Damn it! The man with the blood-colored mark took a deep breath and felt that this time he might really die here. Die for me. One of the Forbidden Army deputy commanders took a step forward and slapped him with a palm. Rumble. This palm had the faint sound of wind and thunder. It was obviously very powerful. For a moment, the man with the blood-colored mark's expression changed. Crack. The man with the blood-colored mark once again turned into a shadow and barely dodged this palm. Suddenly, different Forbidden Army commanders who had been standing not far away suddenly attacked. Army Shattering Fist. This Forbidden Army commander had the strength of peak grade 1. Under this punch, the air faintly trembled. "Ah! You forced me to do this." Seeing this scene, the man with the blood-colored mark knew that he could not escape. The next moment, the blood-colored mark on the man's forehead suddenly exploded and turned into wisps of blood mist. Suddenly, the man with the blood-colored mark strength soared and suddenly reached peak grade 1. Bang! The Forbidden Army commander flew backward. After the man with the blood-colored mark repelled the Forbidden Army commander, he did not take the opportunity to kill him. Instead, he coldly glanced at the other dozen or so Forbidden Army deputy commanders and turned into a shadow again and disappeared. He used a forbidden technique. He can't run far. Pass down the order. Search the palace. Don't miss a single corner. The Forbidden Army commander quickly recovered and looked at the other dozen or so deputy commanders and said in a deep voice. At the same time, not far from the Palace of Immortals, in an extremely inconspicuous shadow, the man with the blood-colored mark stood there with a gloomy expression. "I have to leave the palace as soon as possible." The man with the blood-colored mark suddenly felt a sense of urgency. Now the palace was like a tiger's den to him. He could be exposed at any time and then be surrounded again. There are a large number of Forbidden Army guarding the 4 imperial gates. In my current state, I will be discovered if I even get a little closer, let alone leave. The man with the blood-colored mark thought quickly as he tried to think of a way to survive. Is there anyone else who is a martial arts legend in the palace? The man with the blood-colored mark panicked. Logically speaking, with such a big commotion, even if he had the breath-holding jade robe, he should not be able to hide from the martial arts legend. However, since the martial arts legend had not made a move yet, the man with the blood-colored mark guessed that the other party might have left the palace. Thinking of this, the man with the blood-colored mark heaved a sigh of relief. Now I need to find a place where I won't be easily discovered and then recover. When the palace is less guarded, I will have a better chance of escaping. Although the man with the blood-colored mark wanted to leave the palace, he knew that he would not be able to do so in a short time. Where should I recover? The man with the blood-colored mark looked around and finally stopped in the direction of the East Palace. The Empire of Tang has not appointed a crown prince, so the East Palace is the most deserted. If I choose to recover there, it will work. Thinking of this, the man with the blood-colored mark once again turned into a shadow and quickly sneaked in the direction of the East Palace. As long as I get to the East Palace, I have a good chance of surviving. The man with the blood-colored mark had a strong desire in his heart. And for a time he even sped up a lot. According to the intelligence of the Blood Kill Gate, although the East Palace is deserted, the third brother of the current Empress, Su Qin, lives there. If I can control this Su Qin, maybe I can sneak into the Emperor of Tang again and assassinate him. The more the man with the blood-colored mark thought, the brighter his eyes became. He suddenly realized that the East Palace was a treasure for him. It was not that the man with the blood-colored mark had never thought of controlling the Empress or the Prince, but with the character of the Emperor of Tang, these people would have been tightly protected. However, this Su Qin was not the closest to the Emperor of Tang, but they were not estranged either. This would give him a chance to make a move. Soon, the man with the blood-colored mark came to the right side of the East Palace. This is where Su Qin lives. The man with the blood-colored mark glanced around and stepped in without hesitation. However, the moment the man with the blood-colored mark entered the right side of the East Palace, he felt that the world had changed, as if he had come to a vast void. The man with the blood-colored mark was dumbfounded. Then, before the man with the blood-colored mark could react, the world changed again. The man with the blood-colored mark came to a room. Was that an illusion? The man with the blood-colored mark blinked and was just about to breathe a sigh of relief, but then he saw a man sitting cross-legged not far away, slowly looking at him with deep eyes. Chapter 151. Inside the right spring square. The man with the blood-colored mark calmed himself down and quickly looked around. After making sure that there was no ambush, he set his eyes on the man sitting cross-legged not far away. He's Su Qin. The man with the blood-colored mark did not immediately make a move because he did not feel a trace of inner strength from Su Qin. The other party was an ordinary person who did not know martial arts. Facing an ordinary person, even if the man with the blood-colored mark had just used a forbidden technique and lost a lot of his strength, he did not think that there would be any threat. Just as the man with the blood-colored mark was finally able to put down his worries. However, he was suddenly startled. No! Something is very wrong. The man with the blood-colored mark's pupils shrank fiercely. He finally noticed the abnormality in this place. Silence. It was too quiet here. The man with the blood-colored mark had just tried to assassinate the Emperor of Tang and failed. Logically speaking, the palace should be full of forbidden army patrolling and searching. But now, the man with the blood-colored mark did not hear any sound. It was as if this place was completely isolated from the outside world. At this thought, the man with the blood-colored mark's face turned slightly pale. He vaguely felt that he should not have come to the Eastern Palace. Did you just assassinate the Emperor of Tang? At this time, Su Qin glanced at the man with the blood-colored mark and said casually. When the man with the blood-colored mark broke into the right spring square and fell into the heaven and earth array, Su Qin was alerted. Then Su Qin probed with his divine sense and enveloped the palace for a while. He roughly knew what had happened. No wonder you dared to come to the palace. So you're relying on the aura concealing treasure on you? Su Qin only glanced at the man with the blood-colored mark and noticed that the man was wearing an invisible, transparent, and faintly blood-colored cloth. To be honest, with the protection of this cloth, the man with the blood-colored mark's aura was almost invisible. If he encountered some martial artists who had just entered the martial arts legend level, he might be able to escape. Of course, it was limited to martial arts legends of the first heaven. Once faced against a martial arts legend of the second heaven, the effect of this piece of clothing would be greatly reduced. If faced against a martial arts legend of the second heaven, this piece of clothing could almost be ignored. As for Su Qin, Venerable Arhat, who was close to the fifth firmament perfected stage, the cloth on the man with the blood-colored mark had long lost its aura-concealing effect. Aura-concealing treasure? How did you know? The man's heart turned cold. One had to know that the breath-concealing jade robe he was wearing could fool a true martial arts legend, but in the end it was seen through by Su Qin at a glance. How could this be possible? The more the man thought about it, the more his scalp tingled. In the blink of an eye, an incredible thought flashed through the man's mind. Could this man named Su Qin be the martial arts legend who was in charge of the Imperial Palace? Thinking of this, the man with the blood-colored mark began to tremble all over, and an unprecedented regret suddenly emerged in his heart. Even if he stayed in the Long Life Temple and fought with more than a dozen Grade 1 great grandmasters, it was far better than running in front of a martial arts legend. The man with the blood-colored mark suddenly had the illusion that he had just escaped from a wolf's den and entered a tiger's den. No, this was no longer a tiger's den. It was a dragon's den and a phoenix's den. Who are you? Su Qin glanced at the man with the blood-colored mark and asked. I am. The man with the blood-colored mark opened his mouth, and his expression immediately became respectful. If his guess was true, and Su Qin was really the martial arts legend who oversaw the palace, then he had no choice but to be respectful at this moment. Bloodkill Gate's current generation Bloodkiller greets Senior. The man with the blood-colored mark bowed his head and said, not daring to look directly at Su Qin. Although in the eyes of the man with the blood-colored mark, Su Qin was very young and did not look as old as him. But if Su Qin was really a martial arts legend, then what was the point of his young appearance? For any martial arts legend, regaining one's youth and eternal youth was as simple as eating and drinking. Su Qin looks very young on the surface, but maybe he is an old monster who has lived for hundreds of years. Bloodkill Gate. Blood Killer? Su Qin had a thoughtful look on his face. He had stayed in the palace for more than 10 years, and had read all the ancient books collected in the palace. Naturally, he knew about the Bloodkill Gate. In today's world, the last martial arts legend came from the Bloodkill Gate. Since 200 years ago, when the martial arts legend of the Bloodkill Gate crossed the sea and disappeared, no martial arts legend was born in the world. Of course, Su Qin was an exception. As for the Bloodkiller, he was the core disciple of the Bloodkill Gate, and the future sect master of the Bloodkill Gate. The Bloodkill art cultivated by each generation of the Bloodkill Gate was passed down from the martial arts legend of the Bloodkill Gate 200 years ago. This time my Bloodkill Gate has disturbed Senior and deserves to die. When I go back, I will definitely come to apologize. The man with the blood-colored mark bowed and said. He deliberately repeated the words Bloodkill Gate twice in order to make Su Qin a little afraid. After all, although the martial arts legend of the Bloodkill Gate crossed the sea and disappeared, he did not completely fall. If Su Qin had a little fear in his heart, then this would be his only chance of survival. I see. Su Qin nodded slightly. You can die now. Su Qin raised his hand slightly and casually grabbed toward the void. In an instant, an invisible wave enveloped the entire right spring square. The air, the world chi, everything was frozen under this wave. The man with the blood-colored mark only felt that he was like a bug trapped in a deep lake. It was extremely difficult for him to move, let alone escape. A strong panic appeared on the man's face, but under the suppression of absolute strength, the man with the blood-colored mark could only watch himself die. Suddenly, just as the man with the blood-colored mark was about to be crushed, buzz! A blood-colored token on the man with the blood-colored mark suddenly emitted a bloody light. Then, a stalwart figure in a blood-colored robe with scarlet eyes emerged from the token. It's the ancestor. When the man with the blood-colored mark saw this scene, joy appeared on his face. The blood-colored token on his body was the identity certificate of each generation of the Bloodkill Gate. It was said that it was left by the martial arts legend of the Bloodkill Gate 200 years ago. The man with the blood-colored mark originally thought that this token was just a token, but now it seemed that there was a backup left by the martial arts legend of the Bloodkill Gate. You killed my disciple. As soon as the illusory figure in the blood-colored robe appeared, he looked at Su Qin, who was sitting cross-legged not far away. Then, the illusory figure in the blood-colored robe saw Su Qin's right hand gently grasping the void. The next moment, the illusory figure in the blood-colored robe showed a look of disbelief. His entire body began to shatter and finally turned into nothingness. When the man with the blood-colored mark saw this scene, he suddenly froze in place and couldn't believe it. Chapter 152. Ancestral Master. The blood-colored man's heart was in turmoil. Originally, when the blood-colored token shone and drew out the phantom of the Bloodkill Gate's mythical ancestral master, he still had hope in his heart. After all, although Su Qin was a martial arts legend, the ancestral master of the Bloodkill Gate was also a martial arts legend. Although the mythical ancestral master that emerged from the token was not his real body, a mythical was still a mythical. Even if he could not match Su Qin, he could at least delay him for a while. With this moment, at least the blood-robed man had hope of escaping. However, the blood-colored man never dreamed that the mythical ancestral master of the Blood-Kill Gate could not even hold on for a moment in front of Su Qin. He turned into nothingness and disappeared. What kind of terrifying thing was this? Could it be that the martial arts legend of the Emperor of Tang's palace is not a beginner, but has already reached the depths of the martial arts legend realm? The blood-colored man only felt shocked and trembled, and despair appeared on his face. Although he was not a martial arts legend, the Blood-Kill Gate had records about martial arts legends. The martial arts legend realm was not comparable to the martial arts 9th grade. When one was at the martial arts 9th grade, one might advance by leaps and bounds because of a great opportunity. But for a martial arts legend there was almost no shortcut. This was also the reason why all the martial arts legends of the past generations crossed the sea and disappeared. One was to pursue the aura of immortality that flashed and disappeared 800 years ago, and the other was to break through to a higher realm. In the eyes of all martial arts legends, the resources of the continent under their feet were barren, and there was no point in staying. Su Qin glanced at the blood-colored token, then waved his hand again, and the blood-colored man suddenly turned into nothingness and disappeared. This should be the means left by the martial arts legend of the Blood-Kill Gate. Su Qin's mind moved, and the blood-colored token suddenly floated up and fell into his hand. At this moment, dense cracks had already appeared on the blood-colored token, as if it would be completely shattered in the next moment. Divine sense still exists. It seems that the martial arts legend is still alive. Su Qin touched his chin, a thoughtful look in his eyes. Su Qin had already used this method of placing divine sense countless times. It was precisely because of this that he was clear that all the divine sense he had split off came from himself. Once he died, these external divine wills would naturally dissipate like rootless duckweed. Since there was a manifestation of divine sense in the blood-colored token, it meant that the martial arts legend of the Blood-Kill Gate had not fallen. However, although Su Qin was sure of this, he wasn't worried at all. He had set up layers of heaven and earth great array in the right spring square, which could completely isolate one's aura. It was likely that the legend of the Blood-Kill Gate had not sensed the disappearance of his divine sense until now. Besides, Su Qin had roughly glanced at the legend of the Blood-Kill Gate's divine sense and had roughly guessed his strength. It was probably between the first heaven and the second heaven. Even if such a martial arts legend really came back for revenge, Su Qin would not care at all. This piece of clothing is magical. Su Qin waved his right hand and saw an invisible, transparent piece of clothing that faintly revealed the color of blood appear in front of him. It was the treasure of the Blood-Kill Gate, the breath-holding jade garment. Although this breath-holding jade garment had no effect on Su Qin and could at most deceive martial artists who had just entered the legend realm, it was already incredible. It seems to be made of special material? Su Qin carefully looked at the breath-holding jade garment with a thoughtful expression. Keep it, I can give it away in the future. Su Qin's mind moved, and this invisible and transparent piece of clothing quickly folded and fell into Su Qin's hand. Blood-Kill Gate. Su Qin's eyes narrowed slightly. The Blood-Kill Gate dared to sneak into the palace to assassinate the Emperor of Tang, which was already considered a provocation. Ever since Su Qin made a move and shot 10 kings from thousands of miles away with the 9 Yao Bao, who in the world didn't know that the Emperor of Tang's palace was under his protection? It seems that after a while, I will have to go to the Blood-Kill Gate headquarters. Su Qin slowly got up and thought silently in his heart. The next day, Su Qin slowly walked out of the right spring square and strolled around the palace unhurriedly. Unknowingly, Su Qin came to the White Jade Square. Let's sign in here today. Su Qin stopped and made a decision in his heart. During this period of time, he has been signing in at the crop altar, wanting to continue to sign in and get an embryonic origin pill, but unfortunately, he hasn't been able to do so. So Su Qin decided to change places to adjust his mood. System sign in. Su Qin looked up at the White Jade Square and said silently in his heart, "Congratulations to the host for signing in successfully. Received, Dragon Elephant Prajna Technique." Dragon Elephant Prajna Technique? Su Qin's heart skipped a beat. The Dragon Elephant Prajna Technique is a divine technique for the physical body, but its effect is not to strengthen the physical body, but to increase strength. The dragon-elephant prajna technique is divided into 13 layers. Each layer has the power of one dragon and one elephant. When cultivated to the highest 13th layer, one has the power of 13 dragons and 13 elephants. With a raise of the hand, one can destroy cities and lakes. From a certain point of view, the dragon-elephant prajna technique is not like other divine techniques that are good at all aspects. The dragon-elephant prajna technique is just a divine technique of pure strength. Of course, the dragon-elephant prajna technique is not without flaws. It is extremely difficult to cultivate, and many people even spend their entire lives at the first or second layer, rarely making progress. Of course, for Su Qin, this flaw was no different than nothing. Under the infusion of the system, Su Qin's comprehension of the dragon-elephant prajna technique has probably reached the level of the founder. Coupled with various cultivation resources, such as blood bodhi, vermilion fruit, etc., Su Qin is confident that he can cultivate the dragon-elephant prajna technique to the highest 13th layer in a short time. Not bad. Su Qin's face lit up with joy. There are not many divine techniques that can have an effect on him now, and the dragon-elephant prajna technique happens to be one of them. I'll prepare to cultivate tonight and strive to cultivate to the 13th layer in 2 days. Inside the longevity hall, the commander of the Forbidden Army kneeled on one knee and said in a low voice, "Your Majesty, this general has searched the palace several times, but did not find any traces of the assassin." Did not find anything? The Emperor of Tang frowned slightly. He did not doubt the words of the Forbidden Army commander. If the commander of the Forbidden Army had joined forces with the assassin, he would have died long ago. Are there any clues at the 4 city gates? The Emperor of Tang immediately asked. In the Emperor of Tang's view, if the assassin from the Bloodkill Gate wants to leave, he can only do so through the 4 city gates. Your Majesty, the city gates have always been guarded by a large army, and several deputy commanders have been patrolling 24 hours a day. They did not find the assassin. The commander of the Forbidden Army lowered his head and said. When the Emperor of Tang heard this, a puzzled look appeared on his face. The assassin is not in the palace, nor did he leave through the 4 city gates. Could it be that he has completely disappeared? Chapter 153. Inside the Long Life Temple. The Emperor of Tang was puzzled. In his view, the Bloodkill Gate assassin used a forbidden technique in order to get rid of the siege of more than a dozen Forbidden Army deputy commanders. At this time, the other party only has 2 choices. One is to desperately escape from the Imperial Palace. The other is to temporarily hide somewhere in the Imperial Palace to recuperate and wait for an opportunity to escape. But no matter what choice he makes, the other party must be in the Imperial Palace and can't just disappear into thin air. The Emperor of Tang is very confident in the Forbidden Army in the Imperial Palace. These Forbidden Army were left behind during the reign of the Emperor of Tang. Later, they were reformed by Li Shang and can be said to be absolutely loyal. A grade 1 great grandmaster falling into the Imperial Palace is like a fish in a net. It is absolutely impossible for him to leave quietly. Continue the search. If he is alive, I want to see him. If he is dead, I want to see his corpse. The Emperor of Tang pondered for a moment, and suddenly said, regarding the defense of the 4 sides gates, you can relax a little. Relax. The Forbidden Army commander heard this and did not understand for a long time. At this moment, the Bloodkill Gate assassin is still in the Imperial Palace. They should be strictly patrolling. How can they relax? Humph. He is trapped in the Imperial Palace and must be thinking about leaving at all times. In that case, I will give him a chance. The Emperor of Tang, Li Shang, sneered and said slowly. So that's how it is. Your Majesty is wise. The Forbidden Army commander suddenly understood. The Emperor of Tang told him to relax, but he did not really relax. He deliberately exposed a flaw and led the other party to take the bait. Right. Send more people to patrol the East Palace. No matter where the Bloodkill Gate assassin is, Third Brother must not have any problems. The Emperor of Tang seemed to have thought of something and solemnly said, As your Majesty commands. The Forbidden Army commander bowed and then slowly retreated. At the same time, Bloodkill Gate headquarters. A gloomy man exuding killing intent sat on the throne. He was the current sect master of the Bloodkill Gate and the last great grandmaster of the Bloodkill Gate. Under the premise that the other 3 great grandmasters had fallen, he had to stay at the Bloodkill Gate headquarters at all times to ensure that no accidents happened here. After all, for the past 200 years, the Bloodkill Gate had relied on their own martial arts legend to almost reach out to the various countries. Although the various countries did not dare to retaliate because of fear, now that the Bloodkill Gate had suffered heavy losses, there was no guarantee that the various countries would not have other thoughts. It's been such a long time, but there's still no news from Bloodslittle. Looks like she's failed. After a long time, the leader of the Bloodkill Gate sighed and said slowly. He knew that the man with the blood-colored mark had gone to the Imperial Palace to assassinate the Emperor of Tang. He had even given the aura restraining jade robe to the man with the blood-colored mark. As the most precious treasure of the Bloodkill Gate, it was a relic left behind by the myth ancestor. Other than the Gate Master, no one could arbitrarily use it. Originally, the leader of the Bloodkill Gate thought that by relying on the aura restraining jade robe, the man with the blood-colored mark should be able to avoid the detection of the legend in the Imperial Palace and successfully assassinate the Emperor of Tang. As long as the Emperor of Tang dies, the Empire of Tang will be in chaos, and everything the Bloodkill Gate has paid will be worth it. As for the legend in the Imperial Palace of the Emperor of Tang, in any case, the Bloodkill Gate secretly instigated the kings, causing the legend to personally take action. Sending the kings and 3 grade 1 great grandmasters of the Bloodkill Gate thousands of miles away was tantamount to completely offending the legend. In this case, even if the Bloodkill Gate did not assassinate the Emperor of Tang, the legend will not be able to reconcile with the Bloodkill Gate. Sooner or later he will take action. Sect Master, what should we do now? The 2 Bloodkill Gate protectors next to him asked in a low voice. As protectors of the Bloodkill Gate, although they are not peak grade 1, they are still peak grade 1. But at this time, the 2 protectors' voices became cautious. The 2 protectors were very clear that the Bloodkill Gate Master is now extremely angry. If they say something wrong and annoy the Sect Master again, it will not be a good thing. What should we do? The Bloodkill Gate Master bowed his head and thought for a while, then said in a hoarse voice, "Disperse the disciples and scatter them all over the world." This was also the last retreat for the Bloodkill Gate Master daring to assassinate the Emperor of Tang. He knew that this move may completely anger the legend, but he still did it. Because as long as the disciples of the Bloodkill Gate are scattered all over the world, the legend in the Imperial Palace can't do anything to the Bloodkill Gate. Although the legend is invincible in the world, it is almost impossible to accurately target the disciples of the Bloodkill Gate from the countless people in the world. Generally speaking, a martial artist who has just entered the legend realm can only cover a dozen miles at most. A dozen miles is big, but compared to the whole world it is not worth mentioning. Unless the legend is willing to spend hundreds of years to travel to every corner of the world, and use his divine sense to find the disciples of the Bloodkill Gate. But this is the most impossible thing. The legend himself is just a 500-year-old Shoyun. How can he pay such a high price to find trouble with the Bloodkill Gate? Yes. The 2 Bloodkill Gate protectors next to him revealed a worried look. The Bloodkill Gate was forced to disperse the disciples. It was definitely the last moment. Sect Master, when can we gather the disciples again? One of the protectors couldn't help but ask. Soon. The Bloodkill Gate Master shook his head and whispered. The legends of the past almost never stay on this continent for a long time. At most 10 or 20 years later, they will cross the sea and go on the road to immortality. And the Bloodkill Gate can afford to wait for 10 or 20 years. The Emperor of Tang's Palace. Right Spring Square. Su Qin naturally didn't know that the Bloodkill Gate, which was feared by all countries, had taken the initiative to disperse the disciples before he even made a move. Perhaps even if Su Qin knew, he would laugh it off. The Bloodkill Gate Master's retreat may be useful to other legends, helping the Bloodkill Gate block the revenge of a legend. But in Su Qin's eyes, it was not worth mentioning. Other martial artists who have just entered the legend realm can only cover a dozen miles at most, but Su Qin is not new. He is the venerable Arhat who is close to the peak of the 5th heavenly layer. In addition, Su Qin has the Eye of Truth and the Celestial Divination technique. With these 2 secret techniques, Su Qin can completely see half of the Empire of Tang in an instant. In short, if Su Qin is really prepared to lock on every disciple of the Blood Kill Gate scattered in the world, it will only take a few days at most, not hundreds of years. Dragon Elephant Prajna Art. The power of 13 dragons and 13 elephants. Su Qin sat cross-legged, and the faint roar of an elephant and a dragon could be heard. If one looked carefully, they would find that the aura was flowing, sometimes condensing into a giant elephant that stepped on heaven and earth, and sometimes condensing into a golden dragon that roared to the sky. In the end, all the aura quickly converged and merged into Su Qin's body. The Dragon Elephant Prajna art is finally completed. Su Qin slowly opened his eyes, and his face was full of joy. Chapter 154. The Dragon Elephant Prajna art was a divine art that Su Qin obtained from signing in front of the White Jade Square in the palace 2 days ago. After cultivating to the 13th level, one would have the power of 13 dragons and 13 elephants. Generally speaking, even if an ordinary martial artist obtained this divine art, they would spend their entire life wandering around the 1st or 2nd level at most. If their talent and opportunities were enough, they might be able to touch the 3rd or 4th level. But Su Qin only used 2 days to complete the journey that ordinary martial artists could not complete in their lifetime. The power of 13 dragons and 13 elephants, plus the strength of my original physical body, even if I don't use any divine sense or true essence, my physical body alone is enough to suppress an ordinary 4th heavenly layer legend. Su Qin felt the surging power in his body, and a smile appeared on his face. One should know that whether it was a martial arts legend or venerable arhat, the most powerful and most commonly used method was always the power of heaven and earth. Su Qin could suppress an ordinary 4th heavenly layer legend with his physical strength, so one could imagine how powerful his physical body was. In addition, my physical body also has the true dragon aura that is constantly being nurtured. The more time passes, the stronger my physical body will become. Su Qin's thoughts fluctuated, and his face showed a look of anticipation. In the early years, he obtained a wisp of true dragon aura from signing in outside the imperial mausoleum in the palace, which could nurture his physical body at any time. Although the improvement was not great in a short period of time, the advantage was that it was endless. After accumulating for many years, it was definitely very objective. In myths and legends, there were martial artists who broke through the void with their physical body. At that time, I thought it was just made up by later generations. The void is everywhere, but it can't be touched. How can one shatter it with the power of the physical body alone? But now it seems that if the physical body is really strong to the extreme, not to mention shattering the void, even shattering the entire world is nothing. Su Qin's expression was slightly emotional. Next, Su Qin returned to his usual life, signing in and cultivating every day. His life was very fulfilling. A year passed in the blink of an eye. On this day, Princess Li Wan found Su Qin and said with a solemn face, "Third uncle, I feel like I'm about to break through." Break through? You've become a rank 8 martial artist? Su Qin sized up Li Wan and nodded slightly. I got it. You can start breaking through now. I'll take a look for you. All right. Hearing this, Li Wan immediately began to break through in a hurry. Generally speaking, it was extremely important for a martial artist to break through a bottleneck. They would usually find an absolutely safe place to break through by themselves and not allow anyone to disturb them. This was because when a cultivator was breaking through, their entire body's aura and mind would fuse into their body, so they would not be on guard against the outside world. At this time, if there was an outsider present, it was equivalent to controlling this martial artist's life and death. And the fact that Li Wan had broken through in front of Su Qin without any hesitation meant that he had absolute trust in Su Qin. Very soon, the inner force in Li Wan's body circulated and faintly condensed into one. Su Qin casually glanced and knew that Li Wan's breakthrough was not a big problem. In fact, with the guidance of Su Qin, a 5th heaven venerable arhat, and the supply of martial arts resources from the entire royal family, if Li Wan had an accident breaking through to rank 8 martial artist, there would probably be no rank 8 martial artists in the world. As expected, a moment later, Li Wan's aura began to calm down. Third uncle. I've broken through? Li Wan opened his eyes wide and looked at Su Qin with a face full of joy. Almost. You're now rank 8, Su Qin said. After receiving Su Qin's acknowledgement, Li Wan was obviously happier. His eyes were smiling into the shape of a crescent moon. In the future, I must become a powerful martial artist and protect the empire of Tang from being bullied by others. Li Wan waved his small fists, his face full of fighting spirit. Su Qin said from the side, "If you want to protect the empire of Tang, you need at least peak grade 1 strength. Can you do it?" When these words came out, Li Wan was obviously hit, and his small face immediately sank. A peak grade 1 great grandmaster is an existence that is about to reach the end of the 9th grade martial Dao. Looking at the world, there are only a few of them. But for Li Wan, who has just entered grade 8 and has not even completely crossed the lower realm, peak grade 1 great grandmaster is too far away. One must know that martial Dao cultivation is more difficult the further one goes. The lower 3 realms and middle 3 realms can be pushed up with resources, but the upper 3 realms, especially between grade 1 great grandmaster and peak grade 1 great grandmaster, resources are not enough. As for the final peak grade 1 to legend or arhat, luck is even more needed. If your luck is not enough and you cannot grasp the chi between heaven and earth, even if you are grade 1 great perfection, you will be trapped in this realm. In the past, if Su Qin had not resisted the power of heaven and earth with his own strength, it would have been impossible for him to grasp the chi so quickly and break through to Venerable Arhat. At the same time, inside the Long Life Temple, the Emperor of Tang Lishang frowned. It's been a year. It's been a year. Why hasn't the Bloodkill Gate assassin been found yet? The Emperor of Tang Lishang kept pacing back and forth, thinking quickly. During this year, the Emperor of Tang Lishang tried various ways to attract the Bloodkill Gate assassin, such as opening the 4 gates, transferring the Forbidden Army from the Imperial Palace, and even using himself as bait. But the result was no result at all. It was as if the Bloodkill Gate assassin really disappeared into thin air. Your Majesty, could it be that person who made a move? The Forbidden Army commander next to him said cautiously. That person. The Emperor of Tang was silent. The Emperor of Tang naturally knew who that person referred to by the Forbidden Army commander. I heard that as early as a year ago, the Bloodkill Gate dismissed their inner disciples. Obviously, the Bloodkill Gate master was afraid. The Forbidden Army commander seemed to think of something and whispered. In other words, the Bloodkill Gate has confirmed that the assassin's assassination failed and died in the Imperial Palace. I see. The Emperor of Tang pondered for a while and nodded slightly. In truth, he had already thought of this idea before the Imperial Army commander had even voiced it. Because the Bloodkill Gate assassin disappeared too thoroughly, the Emperor of Tang could not think of any other possibility except that someone took action and killed him secretly. Whether the assassin is alive or dead, the patrols in the Imperial Palace cannot be lax. The Emperor of Tang glanced at the Forbidden Army commander and said, "As you wish." The Forbidden Army commander respectfully left the Palace of Immortals. Outside the Right Spring Square, Su Qin sent off Li Wan and turned to enter the Right Spring Square. In a year I have reached the peak of the 5th heaven. It's time to prepare for the breakthrough. Su Qin sat cross-legged and thought silently in his heart. His breakthrough was not comparable to Li Wan's breakthrough from the 9th heaven to the 8th heaven. Every breakthrough of Venerable Arhat involved the physical body, divine sense, and true essence, and could not be careless in the slightest. Even Su Qin had to wait until everything was safe before he began to break through. Chapter 155. In the Right Spring Square, Su Qin sat cross-legged, his thoughts fluctuating. After entering the 6th heavenly layer, with my current cultivation speed, I can enter the 7th heavenly layer in at most 10 years. Grab, grab, grab. Su Qin thought leisurely. Whether it's Venerable Arhat or a legend, once they reach the 7th heavenly layer, it means that they have truly set foot on the peak of this realm. After the 7th heavenly layer, my cultivation speed will inevitably slow down again. Maybe I should prepare for the future? Su Qin's eyes were deep. When he first entered the realm of Venerable Arhat, he felt that his cultivation speed was not as fast as before. If it weren't for the glazed golden core and other holy pills from the Bodhi court in time, Su Qin would still be wandering around the 1st and 2nd heavenly layer, and at most, he would start to touch the 3rd heavenly layer. After coming to the Imperial Palace, Su Qin received innate spirit liquid, blood Bodhi, vermilion fruit, and other spirit liquids and spirit fruits, which once again increased his cultivation speed. In this way, he could reach the 5th heavenly layer in just over 10 years. Su Qin can already imagine that when he becomes the 7th heavenly layer arhat, whether it's innate spirit liquid or blood Bodhi vermilion fruit, the effect on him will definitely be greatly reduced. This is not to say that innate spirit liquid and blood Bodhi vermilion fruit are not good, but Su Qin's level has increased. When you have 10 copper coins, every 10 copper coins increase your wealth will double, and you will be overjoyed. But when you have 10,000 copper coins, if you increase your wealth by 10 copper coins, I'm afraid you won't notice it if you're not careful. In the following time, Su Qin continued to enter the state of signing in and cultivating. In addition, he would occasionally give advice to Li Wan, and during this period, the Emperor of Tang finally integrated the fiefdoms of the 10 kings and firmly held these fiefdoms in his hands. At this time, the Emperor of Tang finally fell into a daze, not knowing whether to continue to implement the order of pushing grace. When the 10 kings still existed, the Emperor of Tang needed to push the Edict of Grace to provoke the disciples of the kings to be hostile to each other. But now, even the top 10 fiefdoms had fallen into the hands of the Emperor of Tang. They had completely returned to the control of the Empire of Tang. Was there still a need to continue implementing the order of pushing grace? The Emperor of Tang tossed and turned in bed for several nights before he finally ran out of the right spring square with a wine pot in his hand. Third brother. The Emperor of Tang waved his hand and shouted. Su Qin walked out of the right spring square and glanced at the Emperor of Tang. He immediately knew what had happened. Third brother. What do you think I should do? The Emperor of Tang and Su Qin sat facing each other and told Su Qin about the difficulties they had encountered. Who do you plan to give the top 10 fiefdoms to in the future? Su Qin did not answer the Emperor of Tang's question first. Instead he asked, who do you want to give the top 10 fiefdoms to? The Emperor of Tang was lost in thought. Indeed, this problem really needed to be considered. The top 10 fiefdoms were located at the border of the Empire of Tang. The purpose of their establishment was to resist the invasion of other countries. It was impossible for there to be no one in charge of the overall situation for such a long time. The Emperor of Tang thought for a long time and looked at Su Qin and asked tentatively, I plan to choose a few disciples of the royal family to manage them. Disciples of the royal family? Su Qin smiled and said casually, aren't you afraid that they will also rebel one day? As soon as he said this, the Emperor of Tang's expression changed. Since the establishment of the Empire of Tang, there had been a rule that no disciple of the royal family was allowed to hold military power. The purpose of establishing this rule was to prevent internal strife in the royal family. If the Emperor of Tang really took the initiative to hand over the top 10 fiefdoms to the disciples of the royal family, he was afraid that he would be the second vassal king. Then I will send a few loyal subjects to manage them. The Emperor of Tang was silent for a long time this time and said, subjects? Loyal and devoted? Su Qin shook his head and said lightly, how long can you guarantee their loyalty? 10 years? 20 years? Or 30 years? Even if the subjects you send are loyal for a lifetime, what about their next generation? How can they be loyal to the fiefdoms? The Emperor of Tang heard this and frowned. Then I will order that the position of vassal king cannot be inherited through father and son? The Emperor of Tang said in a deep voice. Su Qin raised his head slightly and looked out of the right spring square. People are selfish. If they have a rich life, of course they hope that their descendants will have a rich life. I see. I think too much. After a long time, the Emperor of Tang sighed softly. If we look at the long term, no one can compare to the third brother. The Emperor of Tang looked at Su Qin with eyes full of sincere admiration. Whether it was him or the civil and military officials, they only saw the Empire of Tang, but Su Qin saw the Empire of Tang thousands of years later. Third brother, do you want to enter the court as an official? As long as you are willing, the position of Prime Minister will be yours, third brother. The Emperor of Tang thought of something and said seriously. The power of the Prime Minister was so great that it could even replace the Emperor to exercise the imperial power. As early as 200 years ago, it was abolished by the Emperor of Tang. However, the Emperor of Tang was willing to re-establish the position of Prime Minister for Su Qin, which showed how much he valued Su Qin. There's no need. I'm used to being an idle person. Su Qin refused without even thinking about it. If he was interested in power, would he have stayed in the palace for more than 10 years with the strength of Venerable Arhat? Since third brother is unwilling, then forget it. The Emperor of Tang sighed softly, as if he had expected it. Over the years, it was not the first time that the Emperor of Tang had invited Su Qin, but every time, he was refused without hesitation. Sometimes the Emperor of Tang really wondered if Su Qin was the kind of saint who valued power over nothing. Except for saints, who could resist the temptation of being the prime minister? The two chatted for a while and soon talked about Chang'an, the ancient capital of the 10 dynasties. Speaking of which, the Empire of Tang has been passed down for more than 500 years. When Taizu accidentally established the Empire of Tang, I'm afraid he didn't expect it to exist for so long. The Emperor of Tang shook his head and sighed. Accident? Yes. Su Qin raised his eyebrows and looked at the Emperor of Tang. What accident? I forgot, third brother, you don't know about this. The Emperor of Tang saw Su Qin's reaction and immediately said, I don't know if it's true or not. It's all from the mouth of the old people in the palace. There aren't even any relevant books. When Emperor Li Shang said this, he paused for a while and lowered his voice. I heard that the great ancestor never thought of establishing a country at all. Never thought of establishing a country? Su Qin's thoughts fluctuated. He vaguely felt that he was about to come into contact with a big secret. In fact, as early as when Su Qin learned that Taizu of the Empire of Tang was a martial arts legend, there was a doubt in his mind. Why would a martial arts legend want to establish a country? For his descendants? If Taizu of the Empire of Tang really wanted his descendants to pass down the legacy for generations, he would never choose to establish a country. Instead, he would establish a family or simply a martial arts sect in the world. A century-old empire. 1,000-year-old family. Throughout history, almost no dynasty had lasted for more than 1,000 years, but often some families had lasted for more than 1,000 years. And a martial arts sect like the Shaolin Temple had been passed down for thousands of years. If Taizu of the Empire of Tang had been the emperor at the beginning, then it would be fine. But the Empire of Tang's Taizu had clearly established the Empire of Tang after becoming a martial arts legend. Just as Su Qin was thinking, the Emperor of Tang's voice slowly came. It is said that the reason why Taizu established the Empire of Tang was because he discovered a secret in Chang'an. Chapter 156. Chang'an City? Some secret? Su Qin's thoughts turned quickly. That's right. The Emperor of Tang nodded slightly and said, but I think it should be fake. Chang'an City is big, but if there really is a secret, how can it be hidden for 500 years? The Emperor of Tang said matter-of-factly. For more than 500 years, the outer city of Chang'an City had been rebuilt many times. If there were any secrets, they would have been exposed long ago. As for the inner city, although it had always been the same, as the residence of the royal family, there must be an army patrolling and guarding at all times. In this case, there was no secret. I see. Su Qin's expression didn't change. After a while, the Emperor of Tang returned to the Palace of Immortals. After the Emperor of Tang left completely, Su Qin slowly got up, took a step and disappeared. At the same time, thousands of feet high in the sky, Su Qin stood in the air and looked down at the entire Chang'an City. Whether it was the Venerable Arhat or the martial arts legends, even if they were only at the first heaven, they could ride the wind and fly freely. Let alone Su Qin, who was at the peak of the fifth heaven. The secret of Chang'an City? I'd like to see what the secret of Chang'an City is. With a thought, Su Qin's huge divine thought quickly spread out and covered the entire Chang'an City in an instant. At this moment, any action of the millions of people in Chang'an City fell into Su Qin's mind. It was as if he had turned his palm over and saw everything. Although Su Qin had lived in the palace for so many years, he would scan Chang'an City with his divine thought every once in a while. But it was the first time for him to be so careful. Buzz! The terrifying divine thought quickly spread to every corner of Chang'an City like running water. No. Su Qin frowned. The next moment, the divine thought condensed again and began to spread slowly underground. 100 meters. 200 meters. 300 meters. 500 meters. 1,000 meters. Finally, 2,500 meters below the ground of Chang and city, Su Qin's divine thoughts suddenly sensed a strange aura. This is devil qi. Su Qin narrowed his eyes. Su Qin had seen this kind of devil qi in many places, such as the Devil Suppression Tower in the Shaolin Temple, and the Devil Lord who had killed his way into Shaolin. However, Su Qin did not expect that he would find this kind of devil qi under Chang and the ancient capital of the 10 dynasties. Moreover, compared to the demon-suppressing pagoda and the demon master, this strand of demon qi underground was even purer. To be precise, although the two were both demon qi, they were as different as heaven and earth. Just like Arhat's true essence and rank 9 inner strength. Interesting. Su Qin continued to probe the ground with his divine sense. Finally, 3,000 meters underground, Su Qin suddenly discovered a magnificent palace through his telepathic thoughts. This majestic palace occupied an area of several miles. It was empty, but there was a black well in the center, and the strands of devil qi were spreading out from this black well. When Su Qin saw this scene, his figure disappeared again. After a while, in front of the majestic palace 3,000 meters underground, Su Qin's figure quietly appeared. It's so deep underground, I'm afraid that even a peak grade 1 great grandmaster would find it difficult to come in. Su Qin glanced at the majestic palace and thought silently in his heart. That black well. Su Qin thought for a moment and walked towards the center of the palace unhurriedly. He had already scanned the inside and outside of the palace with his divine sense. Except for the black well in the center, everything else was normal. Soon, Su Qin came in front of a stone tablet that was 10 meters high. There were many characters engraved on the stone tablet, all of which were written in ancient characters that were thousands of years old. They were obscure and difficult to understand, but this was not difficult for Su Qin. As early as in the Shaolin Temple, he had read the entire scripture pavilion, including the evolution of the characters, the appearance of the devil's well connected to the cave world, and countless devils poured into the world. The world was in chaos. Fortunately, the devil's well could only accommodate devils below the myth realm. After the bloody struggle of countless ancestors, the devil's well was finally sealed by the imperial dynasty, blocking the passage between the cave world and the world. Ancient characters flashed one by one, letting Su Qin know the cause and effect. According to the stone tablet, a large number of devils suddenly appeared in the world thousands or tens of thousands of years ago, and these devils came from this devil's well. On the other side of the devil's well was the cave world, which was the real world of the devil race. It seems that the level of this cave world is very high, at least much higher than this continent. Su Qin touched his chin, a thoughtful look in his eyes. According to the records on the stone tablet thousands or tens of thousands of years ago, that era should have been the era of martial artists, and there were more than 10 myths in the world. In the wonderful book garden. But in the end, they were still directly crippled by the devils who poured out of the devil's well. It should be known that the devil's well could only accommodate devils below the myth realm. In other words, the humans at that time were only facing a group of first-grade devils at most. And under the premise of at least 10 myths, the humans were still defeated. One could imagine how ferocious the cave world under the devil's well was. No wonder Chang and city is the ancient capital of the 10 dynasties. It turns out that with Chang and city as the center, the imperial dynasty's dragon's luck can barely seal the devil's well. Su Qin thought silently. At this moment, he probably figured out why the empire of Tang's founder wanted to establish a country. It was nothing more than worrying about losing the suppression of the imperial dynasty's dragon's luck, causing the seal to loosen, and finally, devils to enter the world. Keep reading. Su Qin slowly looked at the stone tablet. The records on the ancient tablet, in addition to introducing the horror of the devil's well, also talked about the cave world connected to the devil's well. Since the devils in the cave world could come up through the devil's well, then the people above could naturally enter the cave world through the devil's well. During the fight against the Devil Clan, many martial arts legends had sneaked into the underground Devil's Den, only to find that the world connected to the Devil's Well was far superior to this continent in terms of scale and high-level combat power. And in the cave world, a civilization similar to that of the human race had also developed, and in the vast area there were powerful countries one after another. All the myths who had entered the cave world concluded that the mushroom demon cave world had existed for at least 100,000 years, or even more. After discovering this, the myths who had sneaked in were scared out of their wits and quickly returned, and then sealed the Devil's Well with the Imperial Dynasty's dragon's luck, completely cutting off the connection with the cave world. Su Qin had a rough idea of what happened next. The invasion of the devils directly crippled the martial artists of this continent, and even a few myths had fallen. The remaining myths either hid or disappeared. Time. At least 100,000 years. Su Qin's eyes lit up when he saw this. Chapter 157. At least 100,000 years? How much Tao accumulation would there be after such a long time? Su Qin's heart skipped a beat. Just now, he was worried about whether his cultivation speed would slow down after he stepped into the seventh heaven of Arhat, and whether he should sign in somewhere else. Grab. But now, the appearance of the underground cave world made Su Qin feel like there was a glimmer of hope. For others, the underground cave world is filled with devil qi, and it's not suitable for venerable Arhat to live in. Su Qin's thoughts fluctuated. This was also the reason why the legends who sneaked into the underground cave world escaped. In addition to realizing the power of the underground cave world, they also realized that it would be difficult for them to survive there. Although legends have reached the level of Qi Eater, the premise is that there is enough world's essence Qi to absorb. But there is probably no such thing as world's essence Qi in the underground cave world. But I'm different. As early as when I was in the Shaolin Temple, I signed in and obtained the Devil Buddha Golden Body, and the most terrifying thing about the Devil Buddha Golden Body is that it can transform devil Qi into one's own true essence without any damage. Su Qin's eyes became brighter and brighter. With the Devil Buddha Golden Body, the underground cave world was probably no different from the outside world for Su Qin. As long as Su Qin was willing, he could transform his true essence into devil Qi, and easily disguise himself as a myth realm great demon. Not bad, but there's no hurry now. Wait until I break through and reach the sixth heaven. Su Qin took a deep look at the majestic palace, turned around and left. Imperial Palace. In the right spring square. Su Qin sat cross-legged. I originally wanted to break through in a few days. Su Qin's thoughts fluctuated, and the true essence in his body slowly circulated. Su Qin stretched out his right hand, and an extremely exquisite jade gourd suddenly appeared in front of him. Gulp gulp. Su Qin pulled out the cork of the jade gourd and poured the liquid into his mouth. If other martial arts legends saw how Su Qin treated the extremely precious primordial spiritual liquid by pouring it down his throat, they would probably be so jealous that their eyes would turn red. The primordial spirit liquid was condensed from heaven and earth, and was extremely rare. Ordinary martial arts legends might not be able to find a few drops, even after spending decades or centuries. In the end, when it came to Su Qin, he was actually absorbing it by the bottle. Wang. As the large mouthful of innate spirit liquid entered his body, Su Qin's body suddenly emitted a rumbling sound as a large amount of true essence continuously converged and contracted, as if undergoing some kind of transformation. However, Su Qin was still not satisfied. He picked up the jade gourd again and poured all the primordial spirit liquid into his mouth. Rumble. In the blink of an eye, the innate spirit liquid turned into an endless amount of heaven and earth yuan qi, filling every part of Su Qin's body. Whoosh. Suck. In the next moment, the past Amitabha Sutra circulated madly, ceaselessly absorbing the natural spirit liquid and transforming it into extremely pure true essence that continued to flow through his meridians. A few hours later, Su Qin's body began to glow, illuminating the surroundings and setting off Su Qin vaguely, making him look like a real immortal god that could not be looked at directly and could not be guessed. Not enough. Su Qin frowned slightly and waved his hand slightly. Suddenly, at least a dozen red fruits flew out and fell into Su Qin's mouth. Boom! It was as if the mountains were collapsing and the earth was cracking. The massive amount of spirit qi gathered by dozens of red fruits was enough to cause an ordinary martial arts legend to explode in an instant. However, at this moment, Su Qin stood still and continued to absorb the spirit qi of the red fruits. In the blink of an eye, the aura in Su Qin's body skyrocketed like a great river, filling up the void and suppressing everything. Swoosh! Is this the sixth level of heaven? Su Qin slowly opened his eyes and looked at his hands as he muttered to himself. At this moment, Su Qin could feel that his body was filled with a power that could destroy the world. Of course, Su Qin knew that this was an illusion. Not to mention the 6th level of Heaven Arhat, even the 9th level of Heaven Arhat was far from being able to destroy the world. However, even if he could not destroy the world, it was more than enough to destroy the entire Chang'an city. If the 6th level of heaven is so powerful, how powerful would the 7th level of heaven be? As for the last earth immortal, what kind of existence would it be? Su Qin was fascinated. However, although Su Qin was very emotional, he did not forget about the important matter. Let's go to the underground palace again. Su Qin's mind moved, and when he appeared again, he was at the entrance of the majestic underground palace. Next, Su Qin walked towards the black well in the center with ease. Soon, Su Qin stood in front of the black well. On the surface of the black well, there was a faint golden aura that sealed the well tightly. The moment Su Qin saw the golden aura, he recognized that it should be the power of the dynasty's draconic providence. If it weren't for the suppression of the dynasty's draconic providence, this place would have been occupied by the demon race long ago, and Su Qin wouldn't have been able to discover it at all. I can feel that this dynasty's draconic providence doesn't reject me, and as long as I want to, I can easily pass through the seal of the dynasty's draconic providence? Su Qin touched his chin. Could it be because of the true dragon chi in my body? Su Qin guessed in his heart, but he was more than half sure. Although he had signed in a lot of Emperor Path cultivation techniques in the past few years, he hadn't cultivated much. In his entire body, only the true dragon chi had something to do with the dynasty's draconic providence. And I also faintly feel that there seems to be a living creature on the other side of the well? Could it be that there are demons guarding over there? Su Qin's eyes were thoughtful. Although he realized that there were demons on the other side of the well, Su Qin wasn't afraid at all. With his current strength, even in the underground cave world, he was definitely considered a powerhouse. And the aura of the demons that Su Qin felt wasn't even in the upper realm. At most, it was lingering in the middle realm. Let's lure them over first. Su Qin's thoughts fluctuated, and he suddenly made a decision. Immediately afterward, Su Qin raised his right hand and slowly touched the dynasty's draconic providence above the devil's well. Suddenly, a gap appeared in the dynasty's draconic providence that had sealed the devil's well tightly. Walala! A large amount of terrifying demonic chi gushed out crazily. At the same time, a wild laughter came from the depths of the devil's well. Ha 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 ha! The seal has loosened, delicious human world. This demon is coming. 2 demonic shadows jumped out of the gap in an instant, looking extremely excited. I heard from several lords that the flesh and blood of the human world has a great effect on our demonic arts. This time we can give it a try. Yes, only we know about the seal here, and we can completely occupy this entrance alone. After the 2 demonic shadows jumped out, they were talking with anticipation. Huh, this place. One of the demonic shadows saw the majestic hall around them and was slightly taken aback. That is, the other demonic shadow suddenly saw a man not far away looking at them with calm eyes. Human. However, before the 2 demonic shadows could react, they saw the man with calm eyes slowly stretch out his right hand and slightly grab towards them. Rumble. The 2 demonic shadows only felt that the world was collapsing. Everywhere they looked, the palm that was slowly grabbing them was getting bigger and bigger, filling their vision. Chapter 158. They're similar to the human race. Su Qin looked at the 2 demons who were knocked unconscious by him as soon as they came out, and judged in his heart. These 2 demons were about 2 meters tall, with faint demon scales on their cheeks. As for other places, they were the same as humans. I thought it was some strange shape. Grab. Su Qin nodded slightly, quite satisfied. TSK. If he really wanted to go to the cave world to sign in, he would definitely disguise himself as a demon. If the demons looked very different from humans, Su Qin would have a headache, but now it seems that there was no problem in this regard. Thinking of this, Su Qin looked at the 2 unconscious demons and said, "Wake up, Wang." The eyes of the 2 demons moved, and they slowly woke up. Where is this? The 2 demons opened their eyes and were shocked. They only felt a palm reaching through the sky just now. As for what happened next, they didn't know. Now that they suddenly woke up, they suddenly realized that the situation was not what they imagined. I ask you answer. Su Qin looked at the two demons and said. As early as the stone tablet outside, Su Qin learned the demon language. After half a day of absorption, although he was not very proficient, there was no problem in communicating with the demons. Yes, sir. The two demons looked at each other, feeling bitter in their hearts. At this moment, how could they not know their situation? After a while, Su Qin got everything he wanted to know, and raised his hand, and under the desperate eyes of the two demons, he turned them into powder. It turns out that the cave world connected to this demon well corresponds to a place called Demon Cloud City. Su Qin's thoughts slowly rose and fell as he thought silently in his heart. The strength of these two demons is low, not even in the upper realm. They belong to the bottom of the cave world, so they guard a certain seal and don't leave, just thinking that if the seal loosens, they can take the opportunity to enter the human world. And according to them, the city lord of the Demon Cloud City is the strongest person in the vicinity, belonging to the Demon King level existence. And the Demon King is equal to the Venerable Arhat, a martial arts legend? Su Qin's thoughts raced. This was all the information Su Qin got from the two demons. As for other information such as what was above the Demon King level, what were the big cities outside the Demon Cloud City, and so on, the two demons had no idea at all. But I have at least confirmed one thing. Not to mention how long the cave world has been passed down, this Demon Cloud City alone has experienced more than 10,000 years. According to the Division of Heritage, it is almost no weaker than the Emperor of Tang's palace. Su Qin was shocked. Looks like I'll have to make a trip to the underground cave. Su Qin sat down cross-legged. With a thought, the divine sense in his body began to divide. This kind of division was not like strands of divine sense, but Su Qin had almost separated a small part of his divine sense. If it were other Arhat, a martial arts legend, they would not be able to do this. How important was divine sense? Not to mention dividing a small part, even if it was divided into 1/10, it would be enough to make a martial arts legend depressed and their strength greatly reduced. But Su Qin was different. When he was in the forbidden area of the back mountain of the Shaolin Temple, Su Qin signed in and obtained the Devil Buddha's demonic will division parasitism technique, which could divide his own demonic will to a great extent. The Devil Buddha was suppressed and sealed for 900 years. In extreme despair, he still divided his demonic will every 100 years, broke free from the seal, and bewitched the disciples of the Shaolin Temple. One could imagine the horror of this secret technique. What Su Qin was doing at the moment was not exactly the demonic will division parasitism technique, but a brand new secret technique improved on the basis of this secret technique, which could divide nearly half of his divine sense. This nearly half of his divine sense was completely independent, equivalent to Su Qin's divine sense incarnation, and would not have a time limit like the Devil Buddha. Several hours later, in front of Su Qin, another Su Qin that looked exactly the same appeared. The same aura, the same appearance, the same true essence fluctuations, and the same divine sense circulation. But if someone observed carefully, they would find that the body of the other Su Qin was very illusory, as if it did not have a physical body at all. It's done. I've finally divided it. Su Qin's face turned pale, and a trace of joy flashed in his eyes. Even for him, dividing nearly half of his divine sense was a great loss. If it weren't for the thousands of divine pills in the system space that could restore divine sense, Su Qin probably wouldn't have dared to do so. Next, it's very important. Su Qin's expression was extremely solemn. With a stroke of his right hand, he directly cut off a piece of flesh from his body. And how terrifying was Su Qin's physical body? As soon as this piece of flesh was cut off, the wound began to heal. Countless crystal clear blood flowed, and in a few breaths, it was restored to its original state. Next, Su Qin looked at the piece of flesh that he had cut off. Go, Su Qin said silently in his heart. Suddenly, this piece of blood slowly flew to the opposite divine sense incarnation. The most critical step. Su Qin looked at the piece of flesh. Divine sense. Flesh rebirth. Su Qin just had this thought. The piece of flesh in front of the divine sense incarnation began to vibrate, and countless granulation sprouts spread from the edge of the flesh, slowly spreading to the surroundings. The flesh rebirth divine sense was the divine sense Su Qin obtained from the White Jade Square in the Imperial Palace. It was also Su Qin's second divine sense besides the Eye of Truth. This divine sense can restore the physical body to a great extent, and it can be said to be half immortal. However, Su Qin was not sure if this piece of flesh could be reborn into a complete physical body, because the premise of flesh rebirth to restore the physical body is that the vital parts are not injured. Although Su Qin did not suffer any injuries now, he didn't know if he could rebuild a physical body with this piece of flesh. Time passed slowly. This time, Su Qin waited far longer than the time for the divine sense incarnation. After more than half a day, a physical body that was exactly the same as him appeared in front of Su Qin. And at this moment, the divine sense incarnation next to him got up and slowly merged into this physical body. After a while, this physical body slowly opened its eyes. It's done. Su Qin had a very strange feeling at this moment. The two physical bodies have independent divine sense, but they both have the same consciousness and thoughts. It was as if he had an extra pair of eyes. This should be considered an external incarnation grade ability, right? Su Qin whispered to himself. In fact, Su Qin didn't know at this moment whether this was an incarnation or not, because his control of these two bodies was like his left hand and right hand, without any obscure delay. Even from a certain point of view, Su Qin couldn't tell which of these two bodies was the clone and which was the main body. Go to the underground cave world for me to take a look. As soon as Su Qin had this thought, the opposite Su Qin smiled slightly, turned around, and walked towards the Devil's Well not far away. Qila, the dragon providence at the mouth of the Devil's Well, fluctuated slightly, forming an exit as tall as a person. Su Qin took a step forward and entered the underground cave world through this exit. Chapter 159. Chang'an City. In a majestic underground hall, Su Qin sat cross-legged beside the Black Devil's Well. What a pity! Even with my divine sense, I can only create one divine sense incarnation at most. If I create more, it will have irreversible effects. Su Qin thought silently. The divine sense incarnation was fundamentally different from an ordinary wisp of divine sense. The wisp of divine sense that Su Qin left in his family Su was just a pure wisp of divine sense. With the passage of time, it will be consumed. Even if Su Qin dies, all the stray divine sense will quickly dissipate and cease to exist. But the divine sense incarnation was different. Strictly speaking, the divine sense incarnation was already a separate individual. Although both the divine sense incarnation and Su Qin's original body shared the same consciousness, even if Su Qin died due to some accident, the divine sense incarnation could still continue to exist. In short, the divine sense incarnation was equivalent to Su Qin's second life. In fact, even if he didn't find the cave world, Su Qin was prepared to create a divine sense incarnation during this period of time. Even if the incarnation encounters a powerful enemy in the cave world, it won't be dangerous for me. If I lose an incarnation, it won't take long for me to cultivate it back. A smile appeared on Su Qin's face. This was also the reason why Su Qin chose the cave world instead of overseas. If Su Qin let the incarnation wander overseas, if he was chased by a powerful enemy, it was very likely that the enemy would be led to this continent. But the cave world, even if it's an Earth Immortal Realm demon, it's impossible to cross the Devil's Well and pose a threat to Su Qin's true body. Therefore, Su Qin's situation was always absolutely safe. I wonder what kind of surprise this cave world will give me? Su Qin's face was full of expectation. That's right. This Devil's Well has definitely existed for more than 10,000 years. Even the existence of Chang'an City can't compare to it. I should be able to sign in there. Su Qin turned his gaze and looked at the Black Devil's Well next to him. The reason why Chang'an City was the ancient capital of the 10 dynasties was because it was convenient to extract the power of draconic providence from all the dynasties to suppress the demonic well. Therefore, the Devil's Well must have appeared before Chang'an City was built. Thinking of this, Su Qin walked to the Devil's Well and said in his heart, "System, sign in. Congratulations to the host for signing in successfully. You have received the 9 notes of the demonic path." 9 notes of the demonic Tao? Su Qin did not look surprised at all. This demon's well was connected to the cave world. Signing in here was most likely related to the cave world. The next moment, Su Qin's mind surged with a large amount of insights regarding the 9 notes of the demonic path. Words filled with monstrous demonic energy flashed through his mind. This? Su Qin's pupils shrank slightly. Originally, Su Qin thought that the 9 notes of the demonic Tao was a pure demonic cultivation technique, but from the looks of it now, he had underestimated it. Although the core of the 9 notes of the demonic Tao was still the demonic Tao, the philosophy contained within could be said to encompass all things. With the demonic Tao as the foundation, he analyzed the myriad Taos of the world. This was the 9 notes of the demonic path. The 9 notes of the demonic path was not a divine technique. It didn't have any specific moves, but what it represented was far from what the demonic path could describe. There are thousands of great Taos, but all paths lead to the same destination. After comprehending the 9 notes of the demonic path for a while, Su Qin slowly opened his eyes and sighed softly. Whether it was God or demon, immortal or demon, when cultivated to the extreme, the only difference was the manifestation of power, but the essence was the same. Su Qin didn't expect that the level of the 9 notes of the demonic path would be so high. It had a sense of transcendence. Among the countless techniques I have, I'm afraid that only the Buddha's palm can barely suppress it. Su Qin looked amazed. One must know that the Buddha's palm was claimed to be a personal technique of the Buddha, and it had some connection with the legendary Buddha. But what was the origin of the 9 notes of the demonic path? It was actually close to the level of the Buddha's palm. Not bad. I really made a profit this time. Su Qin nodded slightly, extremely satisfied. All this time he had spent most of his free time comprehending the Buddha's palm, and he had long since gotten bored of it. Now that he had the 9 notes of the demonic path, he could change things up. Whether it was the Buddha's palm or the 9 notes of the demonic path, the truth of the great path contained in them was definitely not as simple as the Buddhist path and the demonic path. They stood from the perspective of the Buddhist path and the demonic path, looking at the other great paths of the world. Su Qin was also comprehending the great paths of the world when he comprehended them, but the focus was different. There's no rush for now. I've divided nearly half of my divine will just now. I'll recover it first. Su Qin's heart moved, and a large number of pills suddenly appeared and were placed in front of him. For other martial arts legends, the consumption of divine will could only be slowly recovered by themselves. As for external pills and the like, pills that could recover divine will were extremely precious. Even if martial arts legends had them, they would carefully store them away and only use them at critical moments. I'll cultivate in seclusion here for the time being. Su Qin looked at the pills in front of him and thought silently in his heart. This majestic hall was located 3,000 meters underground. Unless Su Qin made a move and penetrated the ground, no matter how big the commotion, it would not affect the outside world. It was simply a perfect place for seclusion. At the same time, underground cave world. Su Qin raised his head and looked at the gray sky. This is the cave world? Su Qin's divine will slowly spread out, covering a radius of more than 10 miles. What a dense devil chi, Su Qin whispered to himself. In the cave world, devil chi was equivalent to the world's essence chi above. No wonder in the cave world, even the devils in the middle realm are at the bottom. Su Qin shook his head. In this environment, even a pig can become a martial artist after a long time. The environment was very important. Although there were some peerless geniuses that were hard to come by in tens of thousands of years who could continue to break through in extremely harsh environments, they were still very few. Or even none. The vast majority of creatures in the world needed to rely on the environment to continue to grow stronger. Perhaps the environment of the world could not determine the upper limit of the world, but it could definitely determine the lower limit of the world. Since the cave world has such a cultivation environment, why do they still want to spy on the human world? Su Qin seemed to have thought of something and frowned slightly. Originally, he thought that the environment of the cave world should be very harsh, which led to a large number of devils escaping from here. But now it seemed that this guess was not valid. For example, the people living in the capital of a dynasty like Chang and city would not want to go to the remote countryside, unless there was something in the countryside that attracted them. It seems that the world I live in has many secrets that I don't know. Su Qin touched his chin, a thoughtful look in his eyes. Chapter 160. Su Qin thought for a long time, but he really couldn't think of any place in the human world that was worth spying on. Living beings? Flesh and blood? These things may be greatly desired by low-level demons, but in the eyes of those real demon kings or even above demon kings, they were nothing. Su Qin comprehended the 9 notes of the demonic path, so he naturally knew that the so-called demons were also a kind of living beings. Their cultivation method was similar to that of humans, but the situation they displayed was different. And the demonic well that connected the underground demon cave to the human world was obviously the work of some powerful demons. In other words, even the truly powerful demons in the demon cave were also spying on everything in the human world. Forget it. Let's not think about this anymore. The most important thing now is to convert true essence into demonic power. Su Qin calmed down and looked around. At this moment, Su Qin's true essence was still circulating in Arhat's body. At first he didn't feel anything, but after a long time, he faintly felt the pressure of the world on him. This kind of pressure wasn't the kind of suppression but some kind of rejection. It was as if the underground demon cave world innately rejected any living beings that didn't cultivate the demonic path. Humph! If it was other venerable Arhat, or even great Arhat or earth immortals, they would have a headache in the face of this kind of oppression and rejection. They might even turn around and leave. Because this is not their home ground. If they stay here for a long time, their strength will be greatly reduced, and if they encounter a demon of the same level, it is very likely that they will completely die. But I'm different. Su Qin looked up at the sky, and a huge Buddha statue vaguely appeared in the depths of his eyes. Devil Buddha Golden Body. Rumble. In an instant, the huge Buddha statue in the depths of Su Qin's eyes suddenly changed. The left side was incomparably dark, and demonic energy rose, while the right side was dazzling with golden light, full of Buddha intent. It was the Devil Buddha Golden Body that Su Qin obtained from signing in the forbidden area of the back mountain of Shaolin Temple. The Devil Buddha Golden Body was the fundamental cultivation technique of the Devil Buddha from 900 years ago in Shaolin Temple, and it allowed one to freely switch between Buddha and demon. Wang. Su Qin continued to operate the Devil Buddha Golden Body. In the blink of an eye, the golden Buddha in the depths of his eyes slowly turned pitch black, and a terrifying devil aura spread out in all directions. Dozens of li away from Su Qin, a group of demons from the demon cloud city suddenly opened their eyes and looked in a certain direction in shock. This aura, could it be that a demon king is coming to our demon cloud city? One of the demons muttered to himself with a look of horror on his face. Demon king. It's at least a high-level devil king. Another relatively old-age demon felt waves of emotions surging in his heart. The city lord of the demon cloud city was a demon king. He ruled over an area of 10,000 miles. Those who followed him would live and those who opposed him would die. His demon might was boundless. But in the eyes of this old-age demon, even the high and mighty city lord was inferior in front of that aura in the distance. One must know that the city lord has been in the demon king realm for hundreds of years. He has already cultivated to the extreme depths of this realm. Except for the legendary high-level demon king, the old-age demon couldn't think of anyone who could suppress the city lord in terms of aura. I'm afraid the demon cloud city will not be peaceful. The old-age demon glanced at the other demons and whispered, "This time we will leave. Don't come back for 100 years. Yes. The rest of the demons looked at each other, barely suppressing the shock in their hearts, and spoke in unison. Mengyuan Empire. On the endless grassland. Ha 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 ha. Aura. I finally grasped that aura. A tall man looked up to the sky and roared, and a terrifying aura shook in all directions. When the people next to him saw this scene, they immediately knelt on the ground. Congratulations to the Imperial Preceptor for taking the last step. You are invincible in the world. Taking the last step? The Imperial Preceptor turned his head and glanced at them, then shook his head and said, I haven't yet, but now that the 3 elements have merged into one, I have the aura. I will be able to take that step in a year or a few months. The Imperial Preceptor's tone showed endless joy. Since stepping into the martial Tao, he has been waiting for this day for more than 100 years. Now that his wish has been fulfilled, how could he not be happy? The people next to him looked at each other, and their expressions were also very excited. How many years, a legend has finally walked out of the endless grassland. At this moment, the imperial preceptor's expression gradually calmed down. He looked at the people and said, "Tell the emperor in 2 years at the latest, I will personally meet the legend of Chang and city. If the Meng Yuan Empire wants to unify the world and achieve a great cause, they must face the legend of Chang and city." And this day the imperial preceptor couldn't wait any longer. Although the imperial preceptor doesn't know the depth of the legend of Chang and city, since the other party hasn't left this continent, his strength should be between the first and second heavenly layer. The imperial preceptor is confident in his vitality, his cultivation method is good at killing, and he carries the fate of the entire Meng Yuan Empire. Even if he can't defeat the legend, there is no problem in retreating. At the same time, the Emperor of Tang's palace, Cunning Palace. Empress Su Yueyun drank a mouthful of ginseng soup, her face slightly pale. During this time, Su Yueyun has been feeling a little uncomfortable, but the imperial doctors in the palace have not been able to find the reason. Su Yueyun can only guess that this winter is too cold. It's another winter day. Su Yueyun looked out of the window. At this moment, snow was faintly falling outside and said softly, "Empress, this is the soup made by the imperial doctors. It is said that it can improve blood circulation and warm up the body. It should make Empress feel better." At this moment, a palace maid carefully walked over and brought a bowl of steaming soup to Su Yueyun. "Actually, I'm fine." Su Yueyun shook her head and said, "There's no need to trouble the imperial doctors. In fact, Su Yueyun has drunk a lot of this soup during this time, but it has no effect on her body. She still feels uncomfortable." "Empress, your health is important," the palace maid couldn't help but say. Although Su Yueyun is the empress, she is very kind to them, so all the palace maids and eunuchs in the Cunning Palace hope that Su Yueyun can get better as soon as possible. Seeing this, Su Yueyun couldn't refuse. Su Yueyun gently picked up the soup and was about to drink it. However, at this moment, Su Yueyun's face suddenly turned as white as paper, and even the hand holding the soup was trembling. Su Yueyun wanted to speak, but she felt as if her throat was being choked, and she couldn't spit out a word. Crack. The bowl of soup Su Yueyun was holding fell to the ground and shattered into pieces. Seeing this scene, the palace maid's heart thumped, and her face also turned pale. She immediately shouted for help in a panic. "Oh no, Empress is sick." Chapter 161. The Empress had fallen ill. The news quickly reached the ears of the Emperor of Tang, Li Shang. Immediately, the Emperor of Tang put down everything in his hands and rushed to the Palace of Earthly Tranquility. "Yunyunger, are you okay?" The Emperor of Tang walked to the bed and asked with concern. Su Yueyun's complexion had recovered a little. Although she was not as good as a normal person, she could barely speak. "Your Majesty, I'm fine." "Fine? You're like this and you call it fine?" The Emperor of Tang suppressed the anger in his heart and turned to look at the imperial physician. "What's going on? What's wrong with Yun'er's body?" When the imperial physician heard the Emperor of Tang's tone, he trembled and hurriedly said, "Your Majesty, Her Majesty's body, Her Majesty's body." The imperial physician repeated the words for a long time, but he kept hesitating, not knowing how to say them out loud. When the Emperor of Tang heard this, he suddenly felt a chill in his heart. If Su Yueyun was only feeling unwell, the imperial physician would definitely not have such an expression. Only if the imperial physician found it difficult to deal with would he be so hesitant. "Speak." "I'm listening." The Emperor of Tang took a deep breath and calmed down. "Your Majesty, there is a foreign object in Her Majesty's body. It is this foreign object that is constantly devouring Her Majesty's vitality and consuming Her Majesty's essence, causing Her Majesty to be like this." The imperial physician braced himself and said, "That's not what I want to hear." The Emperor of Tang looked coldly at the imperial physician. "Your Majesty," the imperial physician said carefully, "if you want Her Majesty to recover, you can only completely eradicate the foreign object in her body. However, this foreign object is produced in Her Majesty's body, and is equivalent to Her Majesty's flesh and blood." When the imperial physician said this, he paused for a moment and continued in a trembling voice, "I can't think of any way to remove this foreign object." When the imperial physician finished speaking, he knelt on the ground. I deserve to die, I deserve to die. You should die. The Emperor of Tang left these words and then turned back to Su Yueyun. Yunyang, you must be fine. There are so many imperial doctors in the palace. If one can't do it, I'll change to another one. If they can't do it, I'll cut them all down. Then, I'll offer a reward to whoever can cure you. The Emperor of Tang kept comforting Su Yueyun. Your Majesty. You don't have to say any more. Su Yueyun shook her head and said softly, I know my own body well. That imperial physician did nothing wrong. Su Yueyun tried her best not to cry, because she knew that once she cried, the blow to Emperor Li Shang would be unprecedentedly great. What do you mean nothing wrong? The Emperor of Tang held Su Yueyun's wrist. I spend so much of my salary every year to support them. If something really happened to you, why should I support them? The Emperor of Tang's voice was hoarse, but every word rang in the ears of everyone around. When the imperial physician who was kneeling on the ground heard these words, his body trembled even more. He had a feeling that the Emperor of Tang would really order all the imperial physicians to be cut down. Your Majesty, Her Highness is not incurable. Her Highness can be saved. Her Highness can still be saved. The imperial physician immediately shouted. Oh! The Emperor of Tang heard this and glanced at the imperial physician. Think carefully. If you dare to talk nonsense in front of me, you won't be the only one to die. The Emperor of Tang's words made the imperial physician's scalp tingle. The imperial physician knew what the Emperor of Tang meant. The crime of deceiving the emperor would implicate 9 generations. If his next answer did not satisfy the Emperor of Tang, the consequences could be imagined. Your Majesty, this humble subject is not talking nonsense. This humble subject would not dare to talk nonsense. The imperial physician's teeth were chattering. None of the imperial physicians in the imperial palace can cure the imperial concubine's body. The imperial physician gulped and said loudly, but even if we imperial physicians can't cure her, the imperial uncle can. The imperial uncle saved His Majesty last time. His medical skills are divine, far surpassing us imperial physicians. I think the imperial uncle must have a way. As soon as the imperial physician finished speaking, the Emperor of Tang was stunned. Then joy appeared on his face. That's right. I actually forgot about the third brother. The Emperor of Tang's eyes lit up as he muttered to himself. The yin qi that entered Su Yueyun's body, and the anger that attacked his heart last time were all cured by Su Qin. In the entire palace, if there was anyone who was most likely to cure Su Yueyun, it could only be Su Qin. The more the Emperor of Tang thought about it, the more hopeful he became. What are you waiting for? Go to the right spring square and invite the third brother over. The Emperor of Tang glanced at the eunuchs around him and said in a low voice. He wanted to go and find Su Qin himself, but Su Yueyun was extremely weak at the moment. The Emperor of Tang could not bear to leave. Yes. Hearing this, a young eunuch immediately rushed to the right spring square. At the same time, in the majestic underground palace, Su Qin slowly opened his eyes, a smile on his face. She's finally recovered. Su Qin exhaled softly. In order to create a divine sense clone, he forcibly divided nearly half of his divine sense. If it were any other martial arts legend, they would have been seriously injured on the spot. Even if they could recover, it would be 100 or 200 years later. One had to know that the loss of divine sense was not like the loss of the physical body. If you lost 10% of your divine sense, it would take a month to recover. But if you lost 20% of your divine sense, it would probably take half a year to recover. If you lost 30% or 40%, you might not be able to recover in decades. And once you lost more than 50% of your divine sense, no matter who it was, even Venerable Arhat, a martial arts legend, would fall into a deep sleep on the spot. No one knew when they would wake up. This time Su Qin was stuck at 50% of his divine sense. Coupled with a large number of pills, he could recover so quickly. Just as Su Qin was considering whether to continue cultivating. Someone is going to break into the right spring square. Su Qin raised his eyebrows and looked in the direction of the East Palace. Outside the right spring square, the little eunuch from the Palace of Earthly Tranquility looked extremely anxious. After calling the imperial uncle a few times and receiving no reply, he braced himself and prepared to barge in. Although he might be scolded and blamed by Su Qin afterwards, He couldn't care less now that Empress Su Yueyun was in danger. Are you looking for me? At this moment, Su Qin's voice quietly came from behind. Imperial uncle? The little eunuch was overjoyed. He turned around and bowed deeply. Her Majesty is seriously ill at the moment. His Majesty ordered me to invite Imperial uncle over. Her Majesty? Su Qin's face changed slightly. The Emperor of Tang had been on the throne for more than a decade and had never taken in any concubines. In the entire palace, the only person who could be called Her Majesty was his little sister Su Yueyun. Seriously ill. Su Qin's face was solemn. He extended his divine sense and instantly enveloped the entire palace. A moment later, Su Qin slowly retracted his divine sense and a strange look appeared on his face. Chapter 162. Just now, in that split second, Su Qin's powerful divine telekinesis covered Su Yueyun's body. I was wondering what it was. Su Qin muttered in his heart and sighed in relief. If Su Qin was not mistaken, Su Yueyun was suffering from the cancer that Su Qin remembered from his previous life. To anyone, whether it was Su Qin's previous life or this life, cancer was an incurable disease that had no cure. But in Su Qin's eyes, as long as Su Yueyun was not near Shuan, there was a way to save him. Imperial uncle, are you all right? Her Majesty and Her Majesty are still waiting. Seeing that Su Qin did not respond, the eunuch became anxious. Don't worry, take me there. Su Qin glanced at the eunuch and said casually, yes. Hearing this, the eunuch immediately ran to lead the way for Su Qin. Soon, Su Qin arrived at Cunning Palace. Third brother. The Emperor of Tang immediately stood up and walked towards Su Qin. The Emperor of Tang's voice was a little hoarse, but he looked at Su Qin with hope. At this moment, Su Qin was his only hope. If Su Qin could not save Su Yueyun, the Emperor of Tang really did not know what to do. Su Qin walked straight to the bed and looked at Su Yueyun carefully again. Although he had already seen most of Su Yueyun's body with his divine telekinesis, he still had to look at him personally to be sure. Third brother. Is Yuner all right? The Emperor of Tang waited for a while, and finally could not help but ask. Su Qin was just about to reply that she was fine, but he was interrupted by Su Yueyun in a panic. Your Majesty, I want to stay with third brother for a while. Su Yueyun looked at the Emperor of Tang and begged. Su Yueyun was worried. If even Su Qin said that she could not be cured, the Emperor of Tang would fall from hope to despair. The Emperor of Tang heard Su Yueyun's request, hesitated for a while, and nodded. All right, I'll take him out now. A moment later, only Su Qin and Su Yueyun were left in the entire Cunning Palace. Su Qin did not speak. He used his divine telekinesis again and began to think about how to cure Su Yueyun as much as possible. If it was someone else, Su Qin naturally would not have this problem. He would directly use his true essence to eliminate the source of the cancer. Of course, the other party would definitely suffer a lot in the process. However, Su Yueyun was Su Qin's little sister after all. Su Qin naturally wanted to cure Su Yueyun in the best way. Su Yueyun saw that Su Qin did not speak and looked at her repeatedly. Her heart suddenly sank to the bottom. Finally, she forced a smile and said, Third brother, I want you to accompany me to the Imperial Garden to have a look. The Imperial Garden was the place where the Imperial Palace planted thousands of flowers for the Emperor and his concubines to see. Since Su Yueyun became the Empress, she would come to the Imperial Garden to admire the flowers if she had nothing to do. In the Imperial Garden, Su Qin and Su Yueyun walked slowly. Because it was winter, the thousands of flowers in the Imperial Garden had withered, and there was a sense of loneliness. After all, the Imperial doctors in the Imperial Palace had some skills. Although they were helpless against the cancer, they still made Su Yueyun feel better. At least she could walk. Third brother, after so many years you're still the same. You haven't changed at all. But I'm about to become an old woman. Su Yueyun looked at Su Qin and said softly, Aging and youth are just superficial appearances. Don't worry about it. Su Qin said something that was rare for him. Over the years, in order to not let himself appear too abnormal, Su Qin deliberately whitened his hair a little. But even so, Su Qin still looked unusually young, whether it was in terms of skin or appearance. This made Su Yueyun very envious. After all, even if she was the empress, she could not keep her youth forever. That's true, but how many people in the world can see through it? Su Yueyun smiled. Over the years, she often chatted with Su Qin. Of course, she knew that Su Qin did not care about the outside world. If you want to stay young forever, I can help you. Su Qin glanced at Su Yueyun, and his heart suddenly moved. He remembered that when he was at the Shaolin Temple, he had received a face-retaining pill from signing in. However, for Su Qin at that time, the face-retaining pill was not as useful as a small recovery pill. At least the latter could be treated as candy for Su Qin to chew. As a result, the face-retaining pill was still placed in a corner of the system space. It was extremely disliked by Su Qin. Of course, although Su Qin did not like the face-retaining pill, he knew that for some people the face-retaining pill was comparable to any magical pill. Third brother, you must be joking. Su Yueyun thought that Su Qin was joking with her, so she didn't pay too much attention to it. At this time, Su Yueyun was already prepared to be incurable, and she didn't care much about the so-called aging of her appearance. So many years have passed in a flash. I still vaguely remember that when third brother was still at the family Su, I liked to follow third brother to the back of the mountain to see the peach blossoms. Su Yueyun seemed to be immersed in some kind of memory. At that time, before Su Qin was sent to the Shaolin Temple, she was only 3 years old. Now that decades had passed, her childhood memories had long been blurred. But the only thing that could always flash through Su Yueyun's mind was the peach blossoms at the back of the family Su mountain, and the back of Su Qin, who had always walked in front of her, and was constantly being chased by Su Yueyun. At that time, when the spring breeze blew, the peach blossoms at the back of the mountain all bloomed. It was so beautiful. Su Yueyun closed her eyes, and a smile appeared on her face. I don't know if I can take another look at the peach blossoms. Su Yueyun opened her eyes, and her voice was slightly melancholy. Peach blossoms were flowers that only bloomed in spring, but it was winter now, and there was less than half a year before the peach blossoms bloomed. And Su Yueyun really wasn't sure if she could last until then. You want to see the peach blossoms now? Su Qin turned to look at Su Yueyun and asked seriously. Yes. Seeing Su Qin's serious look, Su Yueyun couldn't help but laugh. But I also know that it's impossible. Su Qin shook his head slightly, and took a few more steps forward. Since you want to see it, I'll let you see it. Su Qin's words made Su Yueyun slightly stunned. She didn't expect Su Qin to be so persistent, that he wanted to let her see the peach blossoms that only bloomed in spring and winter. Third brother, Su Yueyun was just about to persuade Su Qin not to take it seriously. However, the next moment, Su Yueyun saw a scene that she would never forget for the rest of her life. Su Qin walked slowly to a withered peach blossom, put his right hand on the branch and said softly, "Open." In an instant, it was as if the god of spring had given an order. With Su Qin as the center, the entire imperial garden within a radius of 100 meters and 1,000 meters was filled with peach blossoms. They were bright and beautiful, and the fragrance of the flowers filled the air, making people feel as if they were in a sea of flowers in May. This, Su Yueyun opened her eyes wide, and looked at Su Qin, who was in the sea of flowers, with a calm and emotionless look in his eyes. If I become Emperor Qing in the future, I'll repay the peach blossoms everywhere. Chapter 163. Outside the Imperial Garden, the Emperor of Tang waited anxiously. Su Yueyun purposely sent him away so that she could be alone with Su Qin. How could the Emperor of Tang not know what she meant? Silly girl, even at this time you're still worried about whether I can accept it. The Emperor of Tang's eyes flashed with gentleness. He had been among the common people for nearly 30 years. Although Eunuch Lu was secretly protecting him under the orders of the Emperor of Tang, in reality, Eunuch Lu was just purely protecting him. As long as the Emperor of Tang's life was not threatened, Eunuch Lu would not appear. Under these circumstances, the Emperor of Tang had experienced the fickleness of human nature. It was not until he met Su Yueyun that the Emperor of Tang truly realized what warmth was. This was also why the Emperor of Tang had not taken in any concubines for more than 10 years after he ascended the throne. He insisted on his promise to only marry Su Yueyun. Your Majesty, Yuner will be fine. Su Shimin beside him could not help but comfort him. With such a big thing happening, family Su naturally rushed to the palace early to see Su Yueyun. That's right, Your Majesty. Little Qin has been in the Shaolin Temple for so many years. He must have learned some real skills. Su Sung-ho also said carefully. I hope so. The Emperor of Tang heard this and sighed softly in his heart. How long has it been since Yuner and third brother went in? The Emperor of Tang was silent for a while, then looked at the gardener in the imperial garden. The imperial garden collected all the precious flowers in the world. Naturally, it needed people to take care of it at all times. It should be known that some flowers were more delicate than people. Once the environment changed, they would wither and die. Your Majesty, it's been about an hour. Hearing this, the gardener immediately replied with trepidation. An hour? The Emperor of Tang frowned slightly. Are there many flowers in the imperial garden now? Do you need a long time to appreciate the flowers? From the Emperor of Tang's point of view, Su Yueyun and Su Qin went to the imperial garden to reminisce at most. It wouldn't take long at all. However, it was a little strange that they hadn't come out yet. Your Majesty, it's winter now, and most of the flowers have withered. There aren't many that are still blooming. The gardener thought for a while and said with certainty. He took care of the imperial garden every day, so he knew everything inside like the back of his hand. Suddenly, at this moment, Su Sung-ho, who was next to them, could not help but exclaim, Smell it? Does it smell like flowers? After Su Sung-ho finished speaking, he sniffed hard and his face was full of disbelief. The fragrance of flowers? What fragrance can there be in the winter? Su Shimin rolled his eyes and was about to reprimand Su Chunghao, telling him not to make a fool of himself in front of His Majesty. But in the next moment, Su Shimin was stunned. It seems like there really is a floral fragrance? Su Shimin was stunned. He couldn't believe it. It's indeed a floral fragrance. It should be the fragrance of peach blossoms. I remember when I was young I used to run to the back of the mountain. There were a lot of peach blossoms there. Su Qingyu swallowed his saliva, his face full of shock. If it wasn't for the fact that he really smelled the fragrance of flowers, he would definitely think that he was hallucinating. Peach blossoms were flowers that only bloomed in spring. It was winter now, so where could he find the fragrance of peach blossoms? Peach blossoms? The Emperor of Tang frowned, as if he couldn't understand why there was the fragrance of peach blossoms at this moment. Peach blossoms. This is indeed the fragrance of peach blossoms in full bloom. The gardeners in the imperial garden next to them were absent-minded as they muttered to themselves. If the fragrance of peach blossoms in winter was just a shock to others, then in the eyes of these gardeners who had been dealing with flowers for most of their lives, their worldview began to turn upside down. No matter what kind of flower, it would only bloom in a specific season. Since ancient times it had never changed. But now the gardeners looked at each other, unable to recover for a long time. The fragrance seems to be coming from the imperial garden. Su Sung-ho looked around and finally looked at the imperial garden. The imperial garden? The Emperor of Tang's expression changed slightly. Third brother and Yuner are also inside. The Emperor of Tang thought of this, gritted his teeth, and immediately walked toward the imperial garden. Su Shimin, Su Sung-ho, and Su Qingyu looked at each other, and finally followed in. Inside the imperial garden, Su Yueyun looked at the peach blossoms blooming in all directions with disbelief. The soaring fragrance filled the air, giving him the illusion that he had returned to the sea of flowers in May. Third brother Su Yueyun stared blankly at Su Qin, his mind blank. At this moment Su Yueyun had a lot of doubts, but in the end he didn't know where to start. Okay, don't talk. I've shown you the flowers. Next I'm going to heal you. Su Qin's eyes became slightly dignified. If it was just to save Su Yueyun, Su Qin certainly didn't need to think for so long. But Su Qin wasn't just satisfied with this. He wanted to use this opportunity to completely transform Su Yunyue's body from the inside out. Sleep first. When you wake up again, you will find that the world has changed. Su Qin looked at Su Yueyun, raised his right hand, and gently pressed on the other party's forehead. Suddenly, Su Yueyun only felt the world spinning, and his consciousness fell into darkness. Ewood spirit liquid. Su Qin's thoughts moved, and a small white jade bottle suddenly appeared in front of him. Inside the jade bottle, a faint green liquid faintly flowed out, exuding an extremely rich aura of life. This bottle of Wood spirit liquid was obtained by Su Qin some time ago. It can transform the body and heal any injuries. For Su Qin, the Wood spirit liquid basically has no effect. Not to mention the 4 transformations of his body, the flesh rebirth alone is far from being comparable to the Wood spirit liquid. Although the Wood spirit liquid is gentle, it is powerful. Martial artists below grade 1 Great Grandmaster can't touch it at all. But since I stepped into the 6th heavenly layer Arhat realm, my grasp of the essence of power has become more subtle. I can completely let ordinary people absorb this Wood spirit liquid. Not to mention little sister is a martial artist. Su Qin looked at the jade bottle in front of him, his thoughts fluctuating. The next moment, the mouth of the jade bottle slowly opened, and a drop of light green liquid flew out. This drop of light green liquid rotated in the air, and a trace of life aura slowly spread out. Go! Under Su Qin's control, the drop of Wood spirit liquid suddenly exploded, turning into a misty green light, enveloping Su Yueyun. Phew! Inhale! As Su Yueyun breathed, the misty green light gradually poured into her body and completely immersed. Wood spirit liquid is a spirit liquid condensed from the vitality of heaven and earth. Only the body of a grade 1 Great Grandmaster can accommodate it. Although little sister absorbed it with my help, it was still a bit difficult. At least she needs to sleep for a while to completely transform the spirit liquid in her body into her own vitality. Su Qin thought silently. On the surface, it seems that Su Yueyun has completely absorbed the drop of Wood spirit liquid, but in fact, most of the Wood spirit liquid is accumulated in her body. At this moment, suddenly there was a sound of footsteps outside the imperial garden. The Emperor of Tang, Su Shimin, and the other Su family members quickly walked in. Chapter 164. Third Brother. Third brother, are you all right? The Emperor of Tang strode in and said anxiously, "Why do I smell the fragrance of peach blossoms?" As soon as the Emperor of Tang finished speaking, he saw Su Yueyun lying on a boulder. Ignoring the fragrance of the flowers, he hurried forward and asked with concern, "Third brother, how is Yuner?" "She's fine," Su Qin replied casually. At this time, Su Yueyun had completely recovered when the Wood spirit liquid entered her body. After Su Yueyun completely absorbed the drop of Wood spirit liquid, her body would be transformed by the Wood spirit liquid and become a wood spirit body. The wood spirit body was a kind of martial Dao physique. It had strong vitality and was immune to all diseases. Even if it did not enter the martial Dao, it could still live for more than 100 years. And if it became a martial Dao practitioner, its talent in martial Dao cultivation, even if it was not as good as Li Wan's, was far better than ordinary people. In fact, ever since Su Qin entered the 6th heaven, he had been thinking about when to give everyone in the family Su a drop of Wood spirit liquid. Not to mention that it could enhance one's talent in martial Dao cultivation, it could at least increase one's lifespan by a few decades. Yun is fine? The Emperor of Tang's heart finally relaxed a little. If it was someone else who said this, the Emperor of Tang might be suspicious. But the Emperor of Tang was very clear about Su Qin's character. What he said was what it was. He would not exaggerate or understate. Since Su Qin said that Su Yueyun was fine, then Su Yueyun was really fine. Little sister feels a lot younger. Su Sungho opened her eyes wide in disbelief. As soon as she said this, the Emperor of Tang immediately noticed something different. If Su Yueyun's complexion was haggard and deathly pale before, then his current appearance had completely changed. Where did the floral fragrance come from? Su Chengyu blinked his eyes and looked around in confusion. At this moment, as Su Qin withdrew his power, the blooming peach blossoms quickly withered. Su Chengyu looked at them for a long time, but still couldn't see anything. Your Majesty, not only has Her Majesty's life force completely recovered, it's even far greater than before. It's truly unbelievable. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the Imperial Uncle's medical skills are unprecedented. One of the Imperial physicians following the Emperor of Tang examined Su Yueyun carefully and exclaimed. He had long known that Su Qin's medical skills were godly, but he did not expect it to be so incredible. One had to know that these imperial physicians had all seen the condition of Su Yueyun's body with their own eyes. They were very clear about the difficulties involved. If Su Qin had spent a few months using various ancient medicines to slowly pull Su Yueyun back, the imperial physicians would have reluctantly accepted it. But now, Su Qin had only accompanied Su Yueyun to walk around the imperial garden, and in less than 2 hours Su Yueyun had already recovered. Not only had she recovered, but Su Yueyun's current condition had never been better. This was simply unbelievable. Third brother. Why hasn't Yuner woken up yet? The Emperor of Tang was happy for a while, but then he found that Su Yueyun had been in a deep sleep, so he asked worriedly, "Although I saved her, she needs to sleep for about 2 years before waking up." Su Qin glanced at Su Yueyun and said. This was also the reason why Su Qin had been hesitating. After all, even with his help, Su Yueyun could smoothly absorb the Yi with spirit liquid, but she still needed to sleep for 2 years. Of course, compared to the benefits that she would obtain later, the 2 years of sleep were not worth mentioning. 2 years? The Emperor of Tang breathed a sigh of relief. As long as Su Yueyun could wake up, not to mention 2 years, even if it was 20 or 30 years, the Emperor of Tang could afford to wait. This time, I'll have to trouble third brother again. The Emperor of Tang bowed slightly to Su Qin and said emotionally. Since he became the crown prince, Su Qin had helped him countless times. The Emperor of Tang could not even remember how many times. Okay. Since there's nothing else, I'll go back first. Su Qin and Su Shiming chatted with Su Sungho and Su Qingyu for a while, and then prepared to return to the majestic underground hall. Now that he had just entered the 6th heavenly layer, he needed to spend some time to stabilize his current realm, so that he could be more familiar with the power of the 6th heavenly layer. After Su Qin left, Su Sungho blinked and couldn't help but ask Su Shimin, "Dad, you haven't asked little Qin the sudden appearance of the peach blossom fragrance just now." Although Su Sungho didn't know what the fragrance was, he was probably sure that it came from the imperial garden. At that time, only Su Qin and Su Yueyun were in the entire imperial garden. If anyone really knew, it could only be Su Qin. Fragrance of flowers? Su Shimin thought for a while and shook his head. Forget it now. Qin must be very tired after curing Yuner. I'll ask Qin the next time I see him. Okay. Su Sungho nodded. At the same time, Su Qin had returned to the majestic underground hall. Sure enough, after reaching the 6th heavenly layer, I vaguely feel that it will take a long time to break through to the 7th heavenly layer. Su Qin sat cross-legged, carefully feeling the power of the circulation in his body, deep in thought. It was different from the cultivation of the 5th heavenly layer. If one wanted to break through from the 5th heavenly layer and step into the 6th heavenly layer, one only needed enough energy, enough accumulation, and enough comprehension. But from the 6th heavenly layer to the 7th heavenly layer, one had to face the bottleneck in the middle. Whether it was a legend or venerable arhat, only by truly stepping into the 7th heavenly layer could one be called a true peak legend or peak arhat. In addition, only the 7th heavenly layer had the opportunity to condense the miniature domain. From this, it could be seen that for any venerable arhat or legend, the 7th heavenly layer was definitely a qualitative change. Cave world. The sky was dim. Su Qin slowly walked in front of a completely withered demonic tree with only the main trunk left. This demonic tree had an ancient aura. Although it had already withered at this moment, it had existed for at least 10,000 years, which met Su Qin's sign and conditions. The sign-in system is bound to my true spirit. Even if I change my body, as long as my true spirit doesn't change, I can still sign in. This incarnation has half of my true spirit, so logically speaking, I should be able to sign in. Su Qin's thoughts fluctuated. What is a true spirit? A true spirit is the most essential thing of a living being. Every true spirit is unique and represents a certain living being. The physical body can be obliterated, and the divine sense can dissipate, but the true spirit is unique. For example, for venerable arhat and legend, the death of the physical body is not a true death. Only when the divine sense collapses will it completely disappear. In fact, this sentence is not completely accurate because after the divine sense there is still the true spirit. Thinking of this, Su Qin looked at the demonic tree in front of him and said in his heart, "System, sign in." Congratulations to the host for signing in successfully. Obtained demonic origin fruit. Chapter 165. Congratulations to the host for signing in successfully. Obtained the demon origin fruit. A cold mechanical voice sounded in Su Qin's ears. Demon origin fruit. A look of joy appeared on Su Qin's face. What he was happy about was not the demon origin fruit itself, but that his guess was confirmed. It's just that, although I can sign in the cave world, the number of times I can sign in per day has not changed. A slight look of regret appeared on Su Qin's face. To put it simply, Su Qin's true spirit is divided into two, and he can sign in with the Emperor of Tang's palace in the cave world. But the number of sign-in per day is still only one. For example, if he sign in the cave world today, if he wants to continue sign in the Emperor of Tang's palace, he can only wait until tomorrow. And if he sign in the Emperor of Tang's palace tomorrow, he will not be able to sign in the cave world on that day. Just as Su Qin was thinking, the sound of careful footsteps came, and a charming demon woman slowly walked over. Master. The demon woman bowed respectfully to Su Qin. This demon woman's name was Mohim. Not long ago, she was being hunted down, and Su Qin saved her after encountering her. Of course, the reason why Su Qin saved her was not because of sympathy, but because Mohim's temperament was extraordinary, and she obviously had other identities. Su Qin just entered the cave world, and he just happened to need a demon who knew more about the cave world. Now I ask you answer. Su Qin didn't raise his eyes, sitting cross-legged under the withered demon tree, and said lightly, Master, please ask. Mohim said obediently. Mohim's appearance was not particularly outstanding, but she had a foxy face and her figure was extremely hot, especially the faint fragrance emitted from her body, which was abnormally seductive. Any man who saw her would want to press her to the ground and ravage her. Do you know about the human world? Su Qin asked casually. The human world? Mohim was taken aback for a moment and immediately said, now that the vitality tide in the human world is at a low point, if Master wants to invade the human world, now is not the right time. Mohim paused for a while, as if thinking of something. However, several demon gods in the depths of the world predicted that the low point of the vitality tide in the human world is about to pass. Vitality tide? Su Qin looked at Mohim. Yes. Moji nodded and continued. The human world is vast, and yuan qi rises and falls like a tide. However, most of the time the yuan qi tide in the human world is at a low point. During this period the human world has withered, and there are very few existences at the Demon King level. However, once the low point is over and vitality surges, the human world will usher in a brilliant era. At that time, not to mention the existence of the Demon King level, even the demon god or higher will be born one after another. And the demon gods in the depths of the world want to invade the human world and seize its origin before the real world comes. Mohim quickly said everything she knew. In fact, this information was a secret even in the cave world. Only demon kings had the opportunity to come into contact with it, but Mohim's identity was special, so she knew this in advance. Low point? Great world. Su Qin's expression remained unchanged, but his thoughts, which had always been calm like an ancient well, began to fluctuate. Even though Su Qin had some guesses in his heart, he didn't expect the truth to be like this. Mohim bowed slightly and stood in place, but she didn't think much about it. For Mohim, Su Qin was at least a high-level demon king. The information she said was a secret in front of ordinary demons, but in the eyes of a real demon king, it was just common knowledge. The reason why Su Qin asked her about this common knowledge should be to test her value. What else do you know? After a moment of silence, Su Qin asked unhurriedly. What else do I know? Mohim thought hard for a while and said, if the human world really comes to the great world, the original most barren continent may become the core of the great world. At that time, all the powerhouses in the human world will flock to that continent. I see. Su Qin's thoughts fluctuated, but his tone was flat. You can go. Yes. Mohim was slightly disappointed. Originally, she thought that Su Qin was going to keep her, but now it seemed that Su Qin had no interest in her at all. After talking so much, he didn't even look at her. Under Chang'an City. In the majestic hall, Su Qin sat cross-legged. Demon origin fruit? Su Qin's mind moved, and a pitch-black fruit that looked like a heart appeared in his hand. The system space was unique. There won't be two just because Su Qin created one divine sense incarnation. Therefore, when Su Qin in the cave world put the demon origin fruit into the system space, Su Qin in the Emperor of Tang's palace could take it out from the system space. However, Su Qin's attention was not on the demon origin fruit at all. Vitality tide? Rising and falling. The great world coming? Su Qin's thoughts turned quickly. Thousands of years ago, the cave world invaded the human world, but it failed in the end. I'm afraid it was because they sensed that the world's vitality was at a low point, and it wasn't worth invading. Su Qin looked at the stone tablet not far away, and his mind moved. At this moment, all the doubts in Su Qin's mind were answered. For example, with the cave world's cultivation environment far better than the human world, why would they want to invade the human world? Now the reason was found. The human world that the cave world wanted to invade was not the human world at this moment, but the human world in the future. The next moment, Su Qin's figure disappeared and appeared thousands of feet high in the sky above Chang'an City. Sure enough, Su Qin closed his eyes and felt carefully for a while. The heaven and earth's vitality is beginning to become richer. The amount of qi in the world has also increased. Su Qin opened his eyes and whispered to himself. Simply put, the current world was slowly becoming suitable for martial artists to cultivate. No wonder it was so easy to break through from the 5th heavenly layer to the 6th heavenly layer. At that time, I thought the vermilion fruit had made a great contribution. Su Qin shook his head slightly. The environment of heaven and earth had become suitable for cultivation, and the beneficiaries were all martial artists, and Su Qin was naturally among them. Even because Su Qin was the only venerable arhat at that time, the benefits he received far exceeded that of other martial artists. It's not just the vitality that has become abundant. Su Qin suddenly thought of something, and his figure rose again, almost reaching a height of 100,000 feet. If he went higher, the 9 heavens astral wind would shatter everything. But with Su Qin's current physical body, he could resist the scouring of the 9 heavens astral wind, but there was no need. A height of 100,000 feet was enough for Su Qin to verify some of the things in his heart. At this point, Su Qin raised his head slightly, looked at the vast sky, and then lowered his head, looking down at the continent under his feet. The sky is getting higher and the earth is getting wider. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.